So good evening to you all and welcome to the council's regular meeting in November. I welcome you all here this evening and hope you got in through the raindrops outside. It looks like everybody's in pretty good shape. So thank you all for being here, and council, thank you for being here. So I'm going to ask to begin the meeting for our town clerk to call the roll.
Marshburn.
I'm present.
Mayor Pro Tem Vance.
Here.
Member Matthews.
Here.
Councilmember Singleton.
Here.
Councilmember Dellinger.
Here.
And Councilmember Behringer. Here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you all for being here this evening. So first order of business is I'll ask Councilmember Matthews to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then Mr. Singleton will be responsible for our invocation this evening. If you can stand, would you do so?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Singleton.
Anyone would like to join in the invocation, please bow your head. Father, we thank you for this day and this opportunity to do work on behalf of the town of Garner, the citizens that we represent. I ask that you be with the staff, be with the council, be with those in the audience as we discuss items important to our town. We ask you to lift up and watch over those who are sick, those who are fighting certain diseases. Ask that you help them, give them strength, give their family strength as they deal with these issues from recovery and rehabilitation. We lift up the men and women who represent the armed forces in this country and bases and installations all over this world. We ask that you be with those men and women and be with their families and protect them as they try to protect the rights and freedoms of our countries and the countries in which they may be serving, Father. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Singleton. Before we get into our agenda this evening, I think it's appropriate for us to take just a moment or two, and I'm going to ask us in a few minutes to just honor him by a moment of silence. But I'd like to recognize a member of the Garner staff planning department, David Banford, who died last week after a long battle with cancer. David was 52 years of age. He was a member of the Tees Chapel Free Will Baptist Church. He worked for 23 years for the town of Garner, with his most recent position being that of Assistant Planning Director. And for those of you who like to know some of our fetishes, or not fetishes, but certainly things we enjoy doing that I didn't know, but David loved fishing and he loved playing guitar. And he was an active member of the Sons of the American Revolution. He loved spending time with his family and the beach or on vacation, and those of us who had a chance to attend his service was certainly heard words of praise for how he was a great father and a great person in his community there in Johnson County where he lived. I think it would be only appropriate for us at this time to honor his name and his memory. I ask you just to join me in just a few moments of silence for him. Okay, and thank you so much. But one other person that many of us know, he's not certainly a member of our town, but many of you may be aware that Dr. James West, who was currently serving as a county commissioner, passed away somewhat unexpectedly. Don't know any other details, but those of you who knew him, I knew him some. Just a fine gentleman, very active in Wake County. And so wanted to mention him as well. And also Mary Lou Todd. I'm sorry.
Betty Lou Ward.
Betty Lou Ward, I'm sorry. Again, I should mention her name as well. She formerly served, and she'd retired from the county commission several years ago, and we mourn the passing of her death as well. Okay, with those things being said, I will ask our town clerk if there are persons who have signed up to speak during petitions and comments.
No, sir.
Okay. So we do encourage you to do that in advance, but at this point, if you came here hoping to make petitions and comments during this period, I will ask you to raise your hand or signify. We will take a few minutes to do that if necessary. Okay, seeing and hearing none, we will move beyond that. The next item of business is the adoption of the agenda, and I'm going to recognize the town manager who will let us know of one change or amendment there that we should note as we're approving that. So, Mr. Dickerson, can you
Yes, Mayor.
guide us in that?
Yes, and Town Council, we need to request that item be added back to the agenda. I erroneously asked the clerk to remove it, knowing that it was going to be continued to a later date. But because it was continued to a date certain, it needs to be added back to the agenda so the request can be made to move it to another meeting date. And so that is a conditional zoning request, CZ MP 22-14, Vintage Garner Apartments. And we will request that you add that to the first item in the public hearings.
Okay. Council, you've heard that request for that change to the agenda, and when we get to public hearings, assuming that it's approved, at that time there will be a proper motion to continue. Am I correct on that?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, Council, what say you in terms of approving the agenda with this particular amendment?
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion properly made and seconded, and for approval of the agenda. If you favor that, would you vote aye?
Aye.
If there's opposition, vote no, and there is none. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm not aware of any presentations tonight, and I'll again ask the town clerk if any that you're aware of.
Sir.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. So the consent agenda, there's basically one item on there. Council, you're asked to approve the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. If you favor the consent agenda, would you vote aye?
Aye.
Any opposition? No, and there is none. All right, we will move into the regular part of our agenda under new and old business. And tonight we have coming before us Mr. Triesenberg, our planning director. Where is Jeff? There he is. I'm sorry. For a presentation as relates to the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan, something that council you've had for some time. And I would ask him to lead us in the presentation and then discussion and vote on this particular matter. So, Mr. Triesenberg, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Bringing back to you the fourth version of the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan. This version should incorporate the last sets of comments that we have received from you all, and in going over the map edits. And so I am prepared just to kind of highlight those again. And what Mr. Noonkester did is he did highlight these changes in a different color this time. So these are highlighted in this blue shade versus the yellow that was used previously. So I'll just walk you through, and feel free to interrupt and ask questions along the way. Otherwise, I'll just kind of keep going through them, and also entertain questions at the end. But the first change was just to add a couple of infographics that we felt were important, that were just, for one reason or another, had been overlooked when they would put the original together. And so that was just to take a snapshot, again, of the Hispanic and Latino population that's currently in Garner. This is taken from the 2021 American Community Survey data, so these are estimates, but they're based off of the 2020 census carried forward. And then again here, just the language, the primary language spoken at home. And so we do have 88.2 estimated that only speak English in the home, but then we do have a representation of the other languages that are spoken at home. Moving on to pages 34 and 35. Again, these maps were updated based on the last go-around of comments, so you'll see that a couple of those neighborhood activity centers were removed. We had a community activity center added, and a few others that were shifted out in this area. Then going to the next page is where the initiatives are at. The editor who does the page layout, she highlighted the whole text just because there were several things throughout. But in reviewing the two versions against each other, in initiatives 1 through 3, it was pretty well just limited to grammatical changes, and the real edits came in initiatives number 4, 5, 6, and 7. So primarily this last paragraph here where it talks about the standalone residential uses, that was expounded upon to give that a little more definition and clarity as had been asked. That continued through 5 and 6 and a little bit into 7. The other change was to remove the recommended square feet of non-residential kind of space at the center to allow us to be more context sensitive depending on the specific location. So those edits were made on pages 36 through 40. So that spilled over again into the neighborhood activity centers as well. Page 42 and 43, again, the maps were adjusted as necessitated by the changes over in the framework map. Page 56 here in the description about mixed use areas. These last two sentences starting with larger developments. Again, this was kind of related to the single family dwelling. These two sentences were added to provide, again, more clarity there. Again, the maps on page 60 and 61 were adjusted accordingly. For example, we had a kind of a misplaced activity center over here, so some of this changed right in here as a reflection of that. And on page 94 and 95 in theme 2, this last paragraph, starting with generally speaking, that was the part that was completely rewritten. It replaced another paragraph that had preceded it. So again, generally speaking, town officials prefer vertical mixed-use buildings for the discernible center of the development. And then one or more blocks radiating out from that discernible center may include horizontal mixed use with different single or multi-use building types intermixed in the same block. So again, trying to give a little more of that verbalized, written description of how the mixed use comes into play and where the different types should be. Then in theme 5, there was, again, as we've discussed, about adding the parts about neighborhood safety concerns and citing some of the concerns that have been brought up during some of our previous cases over the last couple of years, and adding that into the community connection section. Finally, down on pages 234 and 35, there were a few edits here carried over from the framework map changes as well. So that completes my run through the document, just highlighting where those changes were made, and I'm happy to answer any questions on those, and am hopeful that perhaps we can entertain a motion to put this document on the books. We've suggested an implementation date of February 16th to adopt today, but actually implement it on February 16th. We can do it, though, at any time, but just in terms of giving staff a little bit of time to adjust to going from the old plan and evaluating it to the new plan. A little bit of time is helpful, but not required. So again, that's all I have for you tonight to present. I'm happy to answer any questions, and that you may.
Okay, thank you so much, Jeff. And council has had this document for quite a while, and the updates that are mentioned here. So council, give you an opportunity if you have questions for Mr. Triesenberg, and I'll start with Mr. Matthews on my left.
Nothing this time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Mr. Singleton.
I want to note that the February 16th is 2024, and our agenda, the detailed notes, it says 2023, but in the ordinance or resolution, it says 2024. I just want to make sure we weren't going back that far. I didn't think that was possible, but anyway. Just wanted to confirm that is correct. This is next year.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Behringer.
Just one question for the benefit of the audience. Jeff, how long did we work on this, this update?
I believe we started this around September of last year, of 22. So a lot of the intensive work kind of took place over the first 6 to 8 months, and then we've been taking our time to make sure that we're trying to get all the edits and massaging correct since then. Mm-hmm.
I just want to thank everyone who's involved in putting this together, council, planning commission, residents. I think one of the things we realized through the EDO process is you don't end up with a perfect product at the end. There are some rough spots here and there, and I think going forward, as we adopt this, being a little flexible on some things, and when there's conflicting goals, which I already see in this, even related to the one that's coming up tonight, that we err on the side of the higher aspirational side, and not the lower side of what's represented in this document. So just good job, and we'll move forward.
And Mr. Vance.
Yes, Mr. Triesenberg, this was a very aggressive process that we initially started with the comp plan. Started when last year. We knew it was on a tight schedule, and a lot was put into this, and a lot of adjustments have been made along the way. And just one thing, again, I think the planning staff has done a great job in just holding things together, entertaining the various concerns, and keep moving the ball forward relative to getting this where it is now. And as Mr. Dillinger said, it's not a perfect document. We understand that. We understand there is none. And as we go through and hopefully approve this tonight, there is a process that by which if we find something that's of a discretionary manner, we can bring it back and then go through a process of making amendments. Can you briefly just talk about that process shortly, please? Sure.
So just as similar to when we entertain rezoning cases, state law does mandate that if we ever are in the position of finding something, say, inconsistent but reasonable, when that were to be approved, then there's an automatic amendment process that just happens to the plan behind the scenes. So in that vein, a standalone independent comprehensive plan amendment pursued apart from a rezoning case, we would just have it follow that same process. So we would have a public hearing, schedule it, refer it to the Planning Commission for their input, and then back to y'all for that final decision. So we can always amend it that way as well. Yep.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Anybody want to follow up with Mr. Triesenberg? Question? Just to read the first paragraph in the introduction, which I think is instructive as it relates maybe to the viewing public or those who may say, well, what is a Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan? And this just simply says the plan was developed to guide future growth, conservation, and development decisions throughout the community. It is intended to relate to other town plans, policies, and ordinances in place or that may be developed in the future and provide guidance to other government agencies preparing plans or programming projects that may affect the town's planning area. And of course, that's just an introduction to a lot of other information that is shared in this document, and even over in the implementation area, which I won't read from, emphasizes the importance of the guidance that it can provide to the town moving forward. So I join council in and thanking you and your staff and the consultant who assisted with this and putting this together and bringing it forward. So I believe it is proper now for this council to consider a motion to approve this. Is that anything else you have, Jeff?
No, I just wanted to point out a couple of our Planning Commission members came out tonight in hopes of maybe seeing this through. So Mr. Carson and Mr. Voiland are both here representing the Planning Commission tonight. So, and Jahan, you were behind there. And Jahan Hodges, who's one of our newest Planning Commission members, she is also here. So definitely thank them for coming out tonight.
Thank you for recognizing those, and from the mayor, council, I hope, thank you all for your ongoing work as a planning commissioner, but especially for this. Okay, council, need a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt the 2023 Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan by adopting Resolution 2023-2551.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vance, for the motion, and Ms. Behringer for the second of the motion. Council, is there any other comment that anybody desires to make before I ask for the vote? Hearing none, if you favor the motion, the motion to approve this document, would you vote aye?
Aye.
If there's any opposition, you can vote no. And so, thank you, everyone, for making this document take place and for the vote here this evening. It's been a long process, has been noted, but it's been worthwhile. Thank you, Mr. Triesenberg. Okay, the next item of business is, that's the only item under new and old business, I'm sorry. And so we will now go to our first public hearing. Let's see, I guess maybe the first item is to note the item that was put back on the agenda for the main purpose of asking for a further continuance. Is that right? So I believe the person who wants to make that notation should do so at this time.
Mayor, move that.
Just
Is
that
that
they
the first?
picked a specific date of December 19th to be continued to.
December 19th.
Okay, yeah.
Move that we continue the Vintage Garner Apartments rezoning hearing to December 19th, 2023, and continue that hearing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Singleton, and several seconds on that. So, council, I'll ask you to vote on that. So if you favor this motion, would you vote aye?
Aye.
And there is none. Okay, now we will recognize Mr. Harris, I believe it is, for...
Mr. Mayor, if I may ask, because both public hearings are related to the same project, whether you want to hear them as one joint public hearing?
I think that would be probably the proper thing to do, but I'll ask council to weigh in on that. If you have any thoughts to the contrary.
I'm good.
Okay, everybody's good with that? All right. Okay, so items 1 and 2.
So, I believe then the request has been that Ms. Harris will present the staff report for the rezoning. I'll present a report on the development agreement, and then the developer has a joint presentation on both.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Good evening.
This is the park at Garner Station, Planned Development District Conditional Rezoning, CZPD 2204. Applicant is Laura Hallman and the McAdams Company. The owners are East Garner Holding LLC, and the site is approximately 96.37 acres located on East Garner Road. This is the Planned Development District, so that's the PUD book with written conditions. And as of last summer, we adopted the townwide rezoning, so this request is now amended to be rezoned from multifamily A, residential 4, and rural agricultural, which allows up to 1,397 dwelling units by right, to commercial mixed-use conditional CMX C281, which would allow up to 1,050 dwelling units and 20,000 square feet of commercial space. Here is a map showing the site location. So as you can see, it's on the north side of East Garner Road. Just to the north of the site, you can see Creech Road Elementary. Here, Garner Recreation Park, and then additional town park property on the other side of the site. Amazon is just in the corner of the map to the northeast, and then the railroad, the senior center, and some additional housing and residential, including the avenue at White Oak subdivision surrounding the site as well. Here is a street view of the existing conditions on the site, so it's currently vacant and wooded property. Adjacent land use and zoning, so to the north is a combination of multifamily A and rural agricultural, which is the Creech Road Elementary School and vacant property. To the south is a combination of neighborhood mixed use, residential 4, light industrial, and multifamily A. To the east is rural agricultural and R4, which is the future Jurgen Park property. And to the west is Garner Recreation Park, which is zoned R4. Some recent zoning history, you can see this goes back to 1997, but in 2018, the most recent case was by Garner Road Partners to rezone from R20 to MF2 conditional. As I said, the site is currently zoned a combination of multifamily A and single-family residential 4, and also that rural agricultural, which allows 1,397 dwelling units by right. The RA district is approximately 25 acres of that site, and it allows for limited large lot, single family, and some agricultural uses. R4 is a more suburban neighborhood type zoning district, and then MFA would be sort of housing or home scaled multifamily units, including duplexes and townhomes. So the applicant has proposed a number of conditions, all of which are listed for you in your staff report and in the PUD book, but I'll go through some highlights here. So the permitted use table, the applicant is allowing for townhouses, condominiums, multifamily, residential cluster, and 2-family dwellings in the household living category. They're also allowing for adult daycares, daycare centers, bars, nightclub, tavern, indoor entertainment facility, gym, spa, tennis courts, outdoor athletic, and then public park and swimming pools. They are allowing for restaurants, including a drive-through, but that would be limited to 3,000 square foot. So there is some limitations additionally on top of that. They are allowing for a convenience store, a personal service-oriented use, hair salons, banks and financial institutions, sales-oriented uses, and a veterinarian, as well as medical office and medical clinics. So in the PUD book, they do have architectural guidelines listed for each of the product types that they're allowing for. So they also listed those as zoning conditions. I'll read through some highlights here. For the townhomes, they are prohibiting vinyl siding and suggesting using cementitious siding, board and batten, shake and single shingle siding, wood siding, stone or synthetic stone, brick, and stucco. So vinyl would be limited to just trims and window soffits and trims. They will have at least a 2-car garage, and then also I would like to point out here that there will be a covered front stoop and a private patio or deck. So there are some additional details written for you in your report as well. Similarly, with the multifamily, vinyl siding would not be prohibited. They would have varying colors in siding and masonry components. Apartments would have masonry embellishment. And then there would be some breakups in the building facade and roof lines. And then also all buildings would have interior corridors and elevators. For the non-residential, similar building materials, brick, stone, and masonry, decorative concrete block, stone accents, limiting EIFS, and then cementitious siding, and then similar varying roof forms, facade articulations, breaks in roofs, not allowing for large expanses of blank walls. If a parking garage is provided with this development, there would be some architectural guidelines for that as well. So again, proposed materials being concrete, masonry, brick, and stone or stone veneer and metal. The building would be screened by the multifamily units on at least two sides of the proposed parking garage. And then there would be breaks in the horizontal planes and variation in color and texture. I also broke out the conditions into the different sections of the site. So for the multifamily, they're proposing that there would be internal bike storage rooms that would provide parking at the rate of 1 bike space for 10 bedrooms. Parking lot lighting would use full cutoff fixtures and have limited lighting along the southern border parcels. Apartments would be parked at 1.5 units per space, and then they would also provide some electric vehicle charging stations and wiring within the garages for those as well. The multifamily amenities would include a clubhouse, swimming pool, and dog park. And then for the townhomes, each townhome would have either an 8x20 deck or a 8x10 rear patio. And there would be restrictive covenants that require waste receptacles to be screened from view. There would be additional amenities in this area, including a shade structure and a dog park. In the retail area, they would provide additional charging stations. And then project-wide, they have a number of conditions. So there would be a minimum of 1,500 square feet of co-working space, either in the apartment area or in the commercial area. Site lighting for private parking and internal drives would be installed on round black poles at a height no greater than 25 feet above the ground. Fences facing or backing up to common open spaces or surrounding stormwater ponds would be powder-coated aluminum picket type or vinyl fencing. Wood fencing would not be allowed. There would also be a 50-foot perimeter buffer provided to adjacent properties with residential single-family uses along East Garner Road. They will utilize 100% native plantings within the 4.85 acres of natural area that's highlighted on page 27 of the PUD book. And they will plant the SEMs with plantings along upland slopes. There will also be a variable width dedicated greenway easement on the north of the proposed major collector road to encompass existing natural trails for future extension. There will be a 30-foot access easement provided from the major collector public right-of-way to the Jurgen Park boundary, and that would be coordinated with Parks and Rec staff for the final location. The developer will also construct the collector road and multi-use path to Creech Road with associated turn lanes, the new Creech Road tennis court vehicular driveway connection to the new major collector road, and then abandon the existing connection to Creech Road. They will provide a 15-foot wide divided median to be provided at the entrance drive along East Garner Road to obstruct left turn movements for a minimum of 150 feet. And with that, they would enter into a maintenance agreement with the Public Works Department. For townhomes adjacent to alleys that intersect with Major Collector Street, additional plantings would be provided at those intersections at the rate of 3 evergreen shrubs with a maximum height of 24 inches, 2 evergreen trees, and 2 understory trees to screen the alleys from view. And prior to the issuance of first apartment CO, a 50-foot future right-of-way reservation would be provided for future connections to Rend Road. Street trees would be planted within the public right-of-way, but they would be maintained by the developer or by the HOA. And then they also have commitments related to their TIA, so those are listed here as well. Overall community information: this area along Garner Road contains large tracts of undeveloped vacant woods and property. The zoning is a mix of residential and mixed use, with industrial land uses to the south of the railroad corridor. Creech is mainly residential and heavily characterized by the presence of Garner Recreation Park and Creech Road Elementary. There will be approximately 600 feet of frontage along East Garner Road, and the daily traffic counts have been provided to you here. This is a diagram that was provided by the NCDOT in response to their TIA. Staff did just want to call out a few things that have shifted a little bit. So this entrance here through the park has been converted to an emergency only access. So there would not be local traffic going through Huron Park to access the site. And so with that, those additional turn lanes off of East Garner Road might not be required, just based on the emergency access only. And then also at the corner of Creech and Garner Road over here, that would be dealing with some historic property, and so that additional right turn lane might not be allowed to be built just based on that historic property, but the rest of the improvements have been committed to. So that's just something that going forward into site plan approval, we would work with them to determine what could be done. So there was a neighborhood meeting held on June 1st of last year at the Avery Street Recreation Center, where 5 people attended. Questions centered around existing trails, buffers, unit counts, site access, stormwater, and projected price points, building heights, traffic, and more. And then while not required by the UDO, the applicant did hold an additional neighborhood meeting in October of this year at the Garner Senior Center. They also notified both landowners and occupants within 800 feet, which is beyond what they were required to do based on their time of application. There were approximately 17 people in attendance, and questions centered around proposed unit counts, building heights, price range for apartments, the buffers, tree canopy cover, existing trails, any wildlife that might be present on the site, connections to future park property, stormwater, grading, and more. Master plan general information. So as I said, the site is approximately 96.73 acres. That would allow for a maximum of 350 townhomes and 700 maximum apartments. The commercial would be limited to 20,000 square feet. The breakdown of each of those in percentage is also provided in the PUD book. A minimum 25-foot setback along the entire development perimeter is required, except where single-family residential lots of the standard required square footage of the district in which they are located abut similar single-family development. The setback from any street bordering the PUD tract is 35 feet unless a greater setback is required by the UDO. And then a 50-foot perimeter buffer will be provided where the project borders single-family homes fronting East Garner Road. The building separation between single-family and multifamily is 60 feet. There will be 1 point of access on Garner Road and 1 point of access on Creech Road, with that emergency access via Jurgen Park. So here is the project master plan. You can see it's turned on its side a little bit, so north is actually to the plan right here. You can see there's some buffered streams that run through the site and along that boundary. The townhouse block here that has both rear and front-loaded townhomes, so this orange color being front-loaded, and the peach being a rear-loaded product. And additional townhomes throughout the center portion of the site, the multifamily in blue, and then commercial up here in red. This is some ballparks that would be constructed and dedicated to the Garner Recreation Park property, and then that additional access to Creech Road here. Applicant has provided some precedent building elevations of what they envision the site might look like. And then the tree canopy cover for the residential area would be a sliding scale of 18 to 20% to be met, and commercial would be 12 to 14% to be met. A 25-foot perimeter buffer is required. Various sizes of perimeter buffers from 15 to possibly 55 would be required between PUD uses and to existing adjacent uses. So they've shown 25 up to 50, which should satisfy most requirements, but it would just be verified at site or subdivision plan. A 15-foot street buffer would be required along East Garner Road to separate on-site commercial from existing industrial uses across the road. Other street buffer requirements would depend on the final layout of the intersections where those streets abut property lines. But street buffers provide horizontal space separation requirements only, and typically are used to plant street trees and vegetative screening. They would be required to plant street trees every 40 feet along all roadways. So the open space requirement is 25%. They have anticipated 33%, including preserved wetlands, preserved tree canopy, active recreation center, clubhouse, dog park, and private trails. Open space areas would be owned and maintained by the HOA, and required open space will be met with a combination of conservation and recreation space. There are no FEMA designated floodplains. However, there is that buffered stream along the north and also extending down into the site here. And they would be required to meet the 1, 10, and 25-year storm event stormwater requirements. The site will be served by City of Raleigh water and sewer infrastructure. Water will connect to existing service in Creech Road and East Garner Road. Sewer service will be routed northward to existing outfalls, with the exact route to be determined at site and subdivision plan. Again, we would review it for lighting, stormwater, and utilities, as well as landscaping and parking requirements. So the next step in the process would be to refer it to Planning Commission for their review of plan consistency. Just a preview of that, it's currently designated as medium density residential. Then it would return to you for your action on reasonableness. So for tonight, staff recommends that once council has heard comments, concerns, and questions from the public, that the request be referred to Planning Commission for their review. That is all I have for you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Harris. Let me see if council has any questions for you. I'll start with Ms. Behringer to my right.
No, I don't have any.
Okay, Mr. Vance
Understand.
and Mr. Singleton.
Will the applicant be able to answer specific questions about the TA?
I think so.
Okay, thank you.
Matthews, anything? Okay. So we're ready to hear from the applicant at this point in time, I believe, is it?
I think
Or
Ms.
no,
Jones. Yep.
Ms., I'm sorry. Ms. Jones.
You. Mayor, members of council, in conjunction with this project, because a new collector street is required, that collector street to connect Garner Road to Creech Road would need to go through the town property that's known as the Garner Recreational Park. So the developer has proposed a development agreement with the town, and I'll go over some of the requirements that have been proposed to be included with this. Again, development agreements are authorized under 160D, Article 10. The process is, it was proposed in conjunction with the Park at Garner Station, the presentation you just heard from town staff. It does require a public hearing notice and the draft agreement to be posted on the town website. That was done on November 9th, and then the public hearing, which is being conducted this evening. So the overall benefits to the development would be this new collector street between East Garner Road and Creech Road. It would also involve the conveyance of recreational land to the town to expand the Garner Recreational Park. And it would also include enhanced pedestrian connections between Garner Rec Park, the Creech Road tennis courts, and the future Jurgen Park. Several off-site road improvements that were part of the TIA, as well as the extension of sewer to the town's Jurgen Park property, which would be to the northern end of their property. The development agreement does contain some milestones or timing of improvements with respect to certificates of occupancy. So the developer would be required to grade the recreational land to be dedicated adjacent to the Garner Rec Park. That's where you saw the baseball fields shown on the site plan. That would be prior to the 150th townhome building permit being issued. Now, because the Garner Rec Park did receive land and water conservation fund grants in the past, it does require approval from the National Park Service. So the town would have to apply for what's called a conversion of land use, and that would be within 45 days of the PUD approval. So when the rezoning would come back to you, once that's approved, if that's approved in the future, then that would trigger this clock to apply for that conversion of land use. And then the overall term of the agreement is 15 years as outlined in the development agreement. So there are major provisions, mostly with respect to transportation improvements and then parks and recreation, outlining both the developer's obligations and the town's obligations. So to go specifically into some of these, the major collector street, again, from East Garner Road to Creech Road across the Garner Rec Park, that is subject to approval of a conversion of use request by the National Park Service. The developer would pay for appraisals, surveys, environmental studies, and stream and wetland delineations as required to obtain that conversion of use. Also, there would be intersection improvements at New Rand Road and East Garner Road, specifically a westbound left turn lane and eastbound right turn lane, and then a traffic signal, including pedestrian crossing signals. Of course, these improvements are subject to NCDOT and NC Railroad authorization. Continuing the transportation obligations, the developer would create a new driveway connection from the Creech Road tennis court parking lot to the new major collector road. There would be a new local street connection to the future Jurgen Park, with it being located to avoid and minimize impacts on the existing Jurgen House and the Pecan Grove. Road widening along East Garner Road from the development to the East Garner New Rand intersection, including a multi-use path to connect to the existing sidewalk on East Garner Road. There would be a payment of fee in lieu for the eastbound turn lane at the East Garner and Jones Sausage Road intersection. Acquisition of off-site right-of-way, permanent drainage or utility easements, and temporary construction easements as needed for the transportation improvements. And then a future agreement with the town to maintain landscaping within the right-of-way within the development. On the town side, the town's transportation obligations would be to provide easements or rights of entry over Garner Rec Park and Jurgen Park properties for surveying, environmental delineations, and other studies. And then to provide, if the conversion of land use is approved, to provide temporary construction easements as needed for construction of that new major collector street. The term of when that construction would have to be done would be subject to that approval by the National Park Service. And then also to provide a temporary construction easement over Jurgen Park for that new local street connection. Again, the town would dedicate right-of-way over portions of Garner Rec Park for a new major collector street, and dedicate right-of-way over portions of Jurgen Park for the East Garner Road improvements. So that would be along the frontage of the Jurgen Park property. And then if the developer is unable to obtain the needed right-of-way and easements for the transportation improvements, the town would then file condemnation actions, but the cost of those actions would be paid by the developer. Under the park recreation obligations, the developer would construct a multi-use path from Garner Rec Park to Jurgen Park. Also dedicate approximately 7 acres adjacent to Garner Rec Park for baseball fields or other recreational purposes, including the grading. So at this point, they would not actually construct the baseball fields or the recreational improvement, but they would grade it while they were doing their site improvements. The developer would pay all costs related to the conversion of land use, including any filing fees, environmental assessments, surveys, appraisals, site plans, plats, and recording fees. And again, there would be a requirement to extend public sanitary sewer easement and the sewer line to the northern property line of Jurgen Park, which would involve considerable cost savings to Jurgen Park. The town's parks and recreation obligations would be to collaborate with the developer on the grading plans for that dedicated recreational land. And then again, within 45 days of any approval of the planned unit development, to apply to the North Carolina Department of Parks and Recreation for the conversion of land use approval from the National Park Service. As again, the Garner Rec Park had received federal grant money for certain improvements over time at Garner Rec Park. So the park's fee and lieu credits, this project is subject to the former UDO, so the two relevant sections would be 8.6.4 and 8.6.5. In the former UDO, the Parks and Recreation Cultural Resources Advisory Committee would make a recommendation, and then the Planning Commission would determine whether to require dedication of land, payment of a fee in lieu, or a combination. And then if there was a disagreement over that, the town council would make the final decision. The proposed amount of the credit in the public hearing draft that was posted would include the appraised value of the 7 acres of dedicated property, excluding any property required in the approval of the conversion of use request. Typically, in one of these conversions of use, for what acreage that is being taken out of park use, an equivalent appraised value of land needs to be acquired somewhere else in the town. The other credit would be design fees for the grading plan for the dedicated property, and then the construction costs for the dedicated property grading. The developer has proposed to include, and they'll talk to you more in their presentation about what they've added, but again, it would be the same, the appraised value of the dedicated property, the grading plan, design and consulting fees, the construction costs for grading and utility lines, and then the cost for increasing the size and scope of stormwater control devices. One section of the development agreement talks about subsequent approvals, and these are defined in section 4.2 of the development agreement as any special use permits, which they would be required to do based on the unit count of both the townhouses and the multifamily apartment. Any variances, design alternates, or administrative modifications granted by staffs, those approvals would automatically amend the development agreement without a formal amendment or need for an additional public hearing. The amendments and modifications are defined in section 4.13. that the planning director generally has the authority to determine what is a major and what is a minor modification. A major modification would be a cumulative increase of 15% of acreage, a change in the agreement term, that's that 15-year term, or a 10% change in the number of each type of residential use. So 10% change in the number of townhouses or 10% change in the number of multifamily units. And then a minor modification that could be approved by the planning director would be less than 5% change in acreage or changes in the location of individual buildings or the layout of streets. Major modification requires the same process we're going through tonight. It requires a public hearing. So it would always be the same as the original development. And as outlined in the development agreement, the planning director may conduct periodic compliance reviews at which time the developer shall demonstrate good faith compliance with the terms of the development agreement, and then any review, those reports would be promptly provided to the developer, town manager, and town council. There are several dispute resolution clauses outlined within the development agreement with respect to material breaches, mediations, default, legal action, and then termination. And there is a commitment from the developer to make the town whole in the event that the development agreement needs to be terminated. With respect to the assignment section, the development agreement will run with the land. The developer will provide the town with written notice of any assignment. So if there's a subsequent owner to the property or developer, they would need to inform the town of that. And then any deeds of subdivided properties within the development, they will be deemed to assign rights and obligations to all of those subsequent owners of those particular lots or sections or phases of the project. The development agreement does include the ability to use other authorities for reimbursement agreements, such as public enterprises, municipal infrastructure, or other public purposes as outlined in the state enabling law. So the requested action tonight is to receive public comment and for council to provide feedback, and then at a subsequent meeting in conjunction with approval of the rezoning PUD, to adopt a resolution authorizing the town manager to execute the development agreement with East Garner Holdings LLC. And I'm available to answer questions, as well as the developer will have a presentation on both the rezoning and the development agreement.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jones. Let me see if council has questions for you. I'll start with Mr. Vance, to my right.
No questions?
Okay. Mr. Dellinger.
No specific questions at this time, but I do have some concerns with the agreement in that there seems to be a mixing of zoning conditions and terms within the development agreement that would cause some sort of confusion. I have some very specific questions later. I'm also concerned with some of the automatic adjustments that can be made to the agreement, either administratively or through special use permits and minor modifications. That language, that modification language needs to be chucked out. That's related to site development stuff. It kind of supersedes council and our attorney's ability to look at unintended consequences that minor modifications might make. And I've got a lot of questions about the fee in lieu credit. It looks like an attempt to supersede the UDO process for that, which is strong for the town, and it seems like it wants to dilute that so that we're getting less than what we are entitled to per UDO. And I'd hate to commit the town to something in this agreement that when it goes to a process is tying the hands of planning commission and the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee on what they can recommend. I have a lot more comments, but those are the big concerns I have, is the mutability of the document outside of council purview is the biggest concern I have. That's all for right now.
Not sure there was a question for you to answer, but okay. Spare you. Okay, Mr. Singleton.
Nothing at this time. I'll wait till hear the developer's presentation.
And Mr. Matthews.
Nothing this time.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. I believe we are now, anything else from Jeff? Planning? Okay. All right, I see our friends there, Mr. Marsh and others. Who's going to present first? Okay, just state your name and address if you will, sir.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead and take the mic.
I believe the other one has some static in it.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Robert Shunk, 2310 South Miami Boulevard, Suite 238 in Durham. Excited to be here for you, standing before you here again tonight. We first met 5 months ago, July 18th, to be exact, 5 months and 3 days ago. 2 days after that first introduction, I was asked to modify our development plans that had been worked on for over a year with my consultants and your staff. Since July 20th, my team of consultants, your very dedicated staff of town managers, thank you, John, Jody, your sole town attorney, planning staff, inspections, engineering staff work collectively through countless in-person and virtual meetings, phone calls, emails to meet your goals of bringing to the downtown a place to live with a mix of housing units, a place to recreate passively and actively, soon to include the sounds of the crack of a bat. We're providing the town additional retail opportunities, over $2 million of developer-funded off-site vehicular and pedestrian improvements, a new collector road through the site, through the neighborhood, meeting the town's comprehensive transportation plans and extending SOAR over 1 mile to this site, to Jurgen Park, and to other parcels in the basin. I was told directly by your downtown economic development team that your downtown desperately needs more restaurants, a place to grab a sandwich, a beer, perhaps an ice cream cone during the work week or after a sporting event. I've also been told by your existing downtown merchants they are desperately needing more foot traffic from the approximately 1,000 units that we're proposing that will be within a 1.5 mile walk of our new neighborhood. Further delay of the approval of the master plan community or the reduction of units would further strain their successful commitment to downtown Garner. With the countless miles of paved and natural trails and the nearby sports fields, and within the 20 to 30 minute walk of the existing downtown, how great of a place this would be to live, play, and work. The guiding principles of the character topology of the Garner Forward Plan that you've spent countless months on calls for this type of mixed use and high density development here. And congratulations for your vote tonight. Mr. Noonkester and his work with you on the cost of services plan and the comp plan further reported in a study the importance of higher density development with pedestrian friendly destinations. A mix of complementary land uses to public spaces decreases the cost per unit of local services while increasing the tax production to the town of Garner. This is a value-add neighborhood to your town. Thank you, and I'll allow Mr. Marsh to continue with the presentation.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor Marshburn and members of council. I'm Collier Marsh with Parker Poe at 301 Fayetteville Street. I'm excited to bring this project to you and cover some high notes. We've had very thorough presentations from staff already, and I'll just kind of highlight a few items as I go and try and reduce other ones as to not be too redundant, but sometimes I can't help myself. We know the site well. It's an important location. We're in close proximity to Main Street in Garner. right near the New Randon Road intersection to take you to Main Street. Just under 100 acres and predominantly zoned today, multifamily already. When we looked at the site, we did start looking at the current future land use map designation, soon to be replaced, and that's medium density residential. What's interesting is that the site was already zoned multifamily, and it was clear that some sort of change was envisioned for the site, and we were pleased to see how the town's new clue update to the comprehensive plan evolved and how it looks at the site with a new lens. And we've done our best to hit that lens and hit that mark head on. 2 designations applied to the site in the clue update. This is the one from the November draft, so I believe it's the one that's just been adopted. So in the orange in the site is a neighborhood designation that calls for a number of different housing types within neighborhoods, which would include apartments and townhomes. But it also contemplates that you can, within a traditional neighborhood, have ancillary commercial uses included. Along the project's East Garner Road frontage and moving west along East Garner Road, there's envisioned to be quite a bit of change. That's designated as a mixed-use area, and these areas are envisioned to have a lot of the future development of Garner and the more exciting entertainment-type uses in Garner. Within those mixed-use areas, again, multiple housing types are envisioned. Looking at apartments and townhomes, you want to have a good, supportive mix of uses while looking at the context of what's there already to create an overall better mix within the neighborhood. Obviously, non-residential is envisioned within a mixed-use center. It's critical that all these are walkable. So we want everything to be connected by streets or connected by sidewalks, multi-use paths. You want to make sure that people can get to places without a vehicle, that you can walk or you can take a bike. And so we have tried to honor those designations with this project, but within the new comprehensive plan update, there are other parts where we can seek guidance. And so there's also your development change intensity map. And so this is something that'll be interesting to see how it's applied in the future, but it looks at sites and it gives you an indication as to how much a project should evolve. Should this be a modest increase over what's in the surrounding area, or is major change envisioned here? So this site is designated as a level 4 area to transform. What that says is that we want a mix of uses here and we want development of 3 to 5 stories. So for a site that we have today that's largely vacant, that's a major change and something that's different than we see there today. There's also guidance within the new comprehensive plan for supporting your downtown and supporting that Main Street, bringing density there, bringing residences there, bringing new retail uses, and also expanding the downtown area, the traditional downtown area in Main Street, to the other side of the railroad tracks and along the north side of East Garner Road. So with all of that new comprehensive plan guidance in mind, it brings us to the concept plan that has been a long work in progress with input from any number of stakeholders, input from the community, and input from the town staff. There are a number of things we could cover on this concept plan. I think we'll hit them in other slides, but just to highlight the overall concept. So again, plan right is north. East Garner Road is along the left-hand side of what you're looking at. You want to concentrate your non-residential uses on East Garner Road. That's how you're going to develop that mixed-use area. That's how you're going to revitalize that downtown area and create the environment that you're seeking with this comprehensive plan. When you've got your non-residential uses, you want to support them with your densest residential development as close as you can. So that's why we have multifamily behind the non-residential uses. That's shown in blue, those apartments included in there. And then we're transitioning to lower densities as we move to north, plan right on the site, transitioning to townhomes, the vast majority of which are rear-loaded townhomes, which I think the consensus is that those are generally the more attractive. They create a nice urban streetscape, a nice environment, more pedestrian-friendly, so you have parking in the rear along, we call them alleys. That seems to be a bad word sometimes, but they're really private streets where you have driveways and garages in the rear. But then you have a nice walkable pedestrian-friendly environment along those frontages. What's especially cool about some of these rear-loaded townhomes is that rather than having alleys in the back and streets in the front, you have a lot of them that actually front open spaces. So in kind of the core of that middle townhome section, there's a large central open space where those rear-loaded townhomes actually walk out onto their front from their front door to a large gathering area. We took some guidance from council and recent hearings and comments that sometimes you don't want to overprogram those areas. We've had a number of projects in the past where we have our open space and we're squeezing as much as we can put in there. Sometimes it's nice just to have a field where kids can run around and play. And so we've tried to listen to that advice and include that here. Some nice open spaces that can be used as gathering areas. Another similar area just to the left of that where there's a kind of a longer section but also an open space where those units would front. We do have front-loaded townhomes in Plan Right, northernmost section of the site. A lot of that's due to the kind of the confinement of that area and really just not the need to add more streets back there. So we made the decision that it would be more efficient, less impactful to make those front-loaded units. I could talk at length about transportation improvements, and in fact I will in a few moments, but overall we've tried to present a mixed-use environment that is consistent with what the town has envisioned here, and directly conforms to the comprehensive plan that was just adopted. So I think it's pretty exciting to make that big change and look for a new vision for the town, and then immediately followed up with a major project in a key location that honors that vision. Looking at the top of the page, which is Plan West, this project has spent a lot of time trying to address some recent feedback from the town. So we were back in June wrapping up staff comments and gearing up for council hearings on the project when it was brought to our attention by town management. We see a good opportunity to expand parks here. Looking at the future Jurgen Park, we want to see if we can get more ball fields. There's a demonstrated need in the town for more baseball fields, and specifically larger baseball fields than what exists today. Now, the conversation was originally framed for the Plan Right, the townhome section furthest to the north, to figure out if we could put baseball fields there. When we had these early discussions, we put together a little diagram that showed 4 baseball fields right there. The town could get 4 baseball fields in this location. We've learned that was probably a little bit of a cursory exercise and that wasn't feasible, but it led to a long analysis with our team as to how we can achieve the town's goal of adding these baseball fields for public use and achieving the overall development that we were originally seeking. The conversations were originally framed as maybe there's a land swap, so we could dedicate land to the town. There's other town land adjacent that could be used within our project. We chose as a team that to not accept land from the town, to not try and develop other town land, but to say, you know what, we'll figure out how to make everything work on our site and we'll fit it all in. And so that's what we've proposed here. And so this slide is kind of a zoomed in version of what's actually proposed to achieve the town's goal to have those baseball fields. There's a number of components that involve the development agreement and kind of the processes that are involved to make this all work. But ultimately, the outcome of all those processes is that there's going to be dedication of roughly 7 acres, 6.98 acres of our site that will be added in as an expansion to the Garner Recreational Park. That land will be engineered and graded by the developer for use as future ball fields or future parkland if the town elects not to use them as ball fields. In addition, about 2 acres on the town side of the property line would also be graded so that it all works together. So essentially, the developer will leave you with land that's ready to be used as baseball fields, or if the town elects to just have it as open recreation space, it's ready for that as well. So we looked at the comprehensive plan and its guidance for mixed-use areas and how to achieve in a successful mixed-use area. What you want to do is reduce vehicle miles traveled. So traffic has always been a concern throughout Garner and has been a topic of conversation with this project. And one of the reasons that we incentivize mixed-use development is because you can reduce vehicle miles traveled. If you can have opportunities for folks to live, work, and play in one area, they don't need to drive their car to other locations. They can walk to those on site. And so this shows some of the ways that we can achieve that and help to advance those goals. I don't want to overlook vehicular circulation. It'll come up. There is a major collector road through the street. We'll talk about TIA improvements in a few moments. But if you look at the legend in the upper right-hand side of this slide, it's really long. It's really long because there are major pedestrian options for this site. So there are multi-use paths, there are sidewalks, there are existing rough trails, there are added rough trails, there are paved trails. You can walk any part of this site in any number of ways. The pink is one that stands out. Those pink dashed lines are a multi-use path. So think that's the town's greenway standards, but when you're in an urban environment and not in the forested area. So that's a 10-foot multi-use path that allows pedestrians and bicycles to travel on the same path with ample room. And you see that pink line going throughout. It is going through the collector street through the middle of the site. It goes in a loop around the townhome section. It takes you to the northern section of townhomes, running along the future Jurgen Park expansion. Then on New Rand Road, it runs along, or to New Rand Road, it runs along our East Garner Road frontage. And then we voluntarily committed to continue it all the way to New Rand Road to make sure that there's a safe and significant pedestrian connection between our site to get all the way to downtown. But then you see green on there. You see paved trails. We have trails going around stormwater ponds. Within the preserved area, there's a stream in there. There are existing walking trails that are pretty significant. People mountain bike and walk on them today, and so those are going to be preserved with this project, and a greenway easement will be dedicated so those can be used in perpetuity. So if you're trying to find a way to promote walkability, I can't think of a better way than this project. And again, I think that legend summarizes that we've found any number of ways to walk through the site. Tree save and open space, this was brought up in discussions with folks in the community. If we're going to promote dense development, how can we also ensure that we're being environmentally sensitive? Because a lot of times you have competing interests. You don't want to maximize impervious surface or development at the expense of the environment. So this is the as-submitted version of our tree save and open space plan. With tree cover required to have 18%, we're coming in around 19%, of which I think about 9.6 acres are existing tree coverage, and then the rest will be made through street plantings and other added plantings throughout the development. We made an updated version of the slide just to give an overall better illustration of the open space. The shades of green might be a little tough to see, but we tried to break it down with the activated open space. So those are the areas which are programmed for, I guess, as the name suggests, active recreation. Those are generally centered within the developed area. So you have your amenity areas within the townhomes, you have active spaces within the retail. You also have them centered within the townhome, including that large central gathering area that we think will be a defining feature of the townhome section. Then you have a brighter green color, and that is the preserved tree conservation area, and some hash marks showing where the existing tree cover will be preserved. So kind of going through that kind of, it's up and down across the slide, but east to west through the site. But unlike a lot of projects where you have, the unusable area, it's kind of in the back, and that's going to be preserved in tree cover. This is already activated with walking trails, and so it actually has some meaningful value and use for the community beyond that. And those walking trails will connect to town parks. And then last, we just wanted to highlight the perimeter buffers with it's called an olive green on the borders, where we do have wider enhanced buffers where we're adjacent to existing single-family homes. A number of project commitments, as you'd expect. The PUD document here is, I think, 50 pages, and you get to the zoning conditions at the end. There are 28 of them, and Ms. Harris went through those in her presentation, so I won't go over every single one, but just kind of broad categories. We've narrowed permitted uses. The residential uses are as shown on the plans. The non-residential uses focused on East Garner Road are designed to be more neighborhood-friendly commercial uses, so think restaurants, personal service, things that serve that immediate area that would be supported by pedestrian traffic and folks that live right there. Each different use, non-residential, apartments, townhomes, have their separate architectural standards. So we've met the same kind of high bar that the town's expected on other projects, but we've also tried to weave common elements throughout those so that you have a cohesive development. Then we have any number of site plan commitments. We've got a requirement for co-working space. There are EV charging requirements within the retail and the apartment sections. We've got some neighbor-focused elements. As I said, those enhanced buffers. We've got light screening requirements. And then the plan itself has tried to adapt to layout in a way that's as friendly as we can make it. The multi-use path and the things that we just looked at in the prior slide are commitments of those conditions, as are our commitments mirroring the TIA requirements, that those are recorded through the conditions. This is representative imagery of the multifamily that we're envisioning here. It's a maximum of five stories with basements to account for topography, but these kind of reflect the architectural commitments and the style that we envision here. Again, trying to show the type of non-residential development that we're seeking here. We've tried to tailor with the commitments, the architectural commitments, and then the layout, looking at kind of the more neighborhood scale, ideally restaurants and things that are really an attraction for the area that help to support downtown. And then these are the elevations or renderings of the townhomes. The front loader at the top, they're a small percentage of the townhomes, and the rear load at the bottom. TIA improvements are shown on this slide, and I have some more detail on the most critical ones, but we are proposing substantial improvements to the New Rand Road, East Garner Road intersection, as well as a fee in lieu, as was mentioned, the development agreement for that East Garner Road and Jones Sausage Road. The fee in lieu, the reason behind that is because there are other plans in place, and so rather than interfere with the improvements that are already going in line, we would just pay into that. East Garner Road and Site Access 1, just explaining how our intersection would work there with the right amount of turn lanes in and out and stop control. And then Creech Road and Site Access 3, I'll explain more right now, which is we appreciate the significance of Creech Road and concerns about traffic in that area. This slide shows how the intersection is going to function. This is, again, if you're thinking about the plans, this is that collector street as it runs through Garner Recreational Park, intersecting Creech Road. What this slide shows is a southbound left turn lane into our project, but it's also meant to show that we have evaluated the safety of this intersection, ensure that there are appropriate sight distance triangles, and we can verify with our engineer, who is here, Ms. Cheeves, that this will be designed as a safe intersection on Creech Road. I think the most notable traffic improvement here, for any number of reasons, is the New Rand Road, East Garner Road intersection. So the improvements themselves are to take the westbound left turn lane and take it from 50 feet of storage to 350. So you're getting those cars out of the way so that straight traffic does not get backed up for folks turning left. Adding an eastbound right turn lane. Adding a traffic signal at that intersection, which is much needed, and then adding a pedestrian crossing. So not only are we going to help with traffic at the intersection, but we're going to make sure that folks can get across the railroad tracks safely, which I don't know what I'd call it right now, but I'd call it risky to cross those railroad tracks. And so this is much needed improvements. What you see on the left-hand side, that image on the left, is the no-build conditions today. So without these improvements, right now, peak hours, you're having 1,000 feet of queuing. Even at full build out of our project on the right-hand side, conditions are substantially improved over what they are today. So oftentimes when you're looking at transportation improvements, you're thinking about, well, are we mitigating the impacts of our development? Is it offsetting the additional traffic we're adding? Here we can show that this particular intersection is going to perform substantially better. Substantially better also in the fact that I think it's critically important to fix this intersection because of where it is in the town. With North Main Street right there, we don't want people avoiding this intersection. We don't want people afraid to cross the railroad tracks. We want to make sure that that's as safe and as inviting as we can possibly make it. And this helps to facilitate that. Again, feeding into the comprehensive plan goals to help to grow and establish a strong presence in downtown. Now at the bottom here, it says developer funded improvements of 1.9 million. That's not just the New Rand Road intersection. That is all of the off-site street improvements. When you factor in pedestrian improvements, that number ticks up a little over $2 million right now. And I think as we've observed with some other projects, we see cost escalation, but that's cost escalation that is at the risk of the developer here, not of the town. So I will pause there. That is a summary of the rezoning. I'm happy to answer questions or just go into the development agreement, summarize that, which Ms. Jones, I think, covered pretty well, and answer questions. So I'm fine either way.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Marsh. Covered a lot of ground, a lot of information there. I'll start to my right with Mr. Vance to see if he has any questions for you, sir.
Yes, thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. In reference to the TIA, which Mr. Singleton brought up, the traffic impact analysis, was the level of service considered? Yeah. The initial level of service? Absolutely, and I'll just defer if we want to get into the TIA. I think I like to play traffic engineer sometimes, but I don't do a very good job, and I do have Ms. Cheeves here who would answer questions if we have some more detailed ones.
Hello, good evening. My name is Caroline Cheeves, 58 5808 Farringdon Place. I am employed by Ramey Kemp Associates, DRMP, and I and my firm worked on this traffic study. It's been, as Collier mentioned, it's been going on for a little over a year now. So we've had a couple iterations. But to answer your question directly, yes. So we prepared this traffic study in correlation with the town and NCDOT. And there are certain standards that we have to meet. And so level of service is one of those. Level of service and delay are the main things that we look at in traffic studies. So is there a particular intersection that you are interested in knowing?
What is the existing level of service?
Are you talking about New Rand?
New Rand Road, yes.
Okay, let me just pull this. So existing conditions, it is unsignalized, which means that we don't have an overall level of service on those free moving, the intersections or the movements that don't have to stop. But under existing conditions, we are seeing that northbound approach operates at a level of service E, and NCDOT typically wants everything to be level service D or better. And then in the future, the 2029 no-build conditions, we are seeing that northbound approach failing. So we're seeing that operating at a level service F. And then with the
Just 1 second. Mr. Mayor, I have a few more questions, and I'll in reference to level of service. Before you move on, I want to take it incrementally.
Okay.
And looking at the intersection of Garner Road and Creech Road, what's existing?
Garner Road and Creech Road. Existing level of service is level service C.
You said D.
C.
C. Okay. Now the next question is: with the improvements, with the addition of the light at Rand and Garner Road, and also with we will talk about that later. But with the improvements, what is it currently? What will it be?
In the future?
Yes.
Are we still on East Garner Road and Creech?
East Garner Road improvements at the intersection of New Rand Road and Old Garner Road, East Garner Road, where the light is.
East Garner Road and New Rand Road.
Yes.
So we were showing level service D with this development, the traffic signal.
And that's with the current numbers that you have there with total build out.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. All right. Just one more question. I'll pass it on. The next question is pertaining to the recently determined constraints that were discovered, or you probably knew about it, but which pertain to the historical Banks House, which is on the historical register. Also, you have the house right across from that, which is eligible for the register. Then you have the constraint of the railroad right away in close proximity. And you currently have at that location of the intersection of East Garner Road and Creech Road a designated right turn lane.
So that intersection, East Garner Road and Creech Road, in our traffic study, we did not recommend that improvement, and we were showing that in the build conditions, our development, the intersection was still going to operate at a level service C, which is an acceptable level of service. NCDOT is looking at the NCDOT made that recommendation just based on the existing traffic out there, just looking at traffic volumes in general, and just wanted us to pursue that right turn lane. We have had initial discussions with them, letting them know that would require property from that historic house. So they are aware that is not a feasible improvement at East Garner Road and Creech Road. However, that intersection is expected to operate at acceptable levels of service without that turn lane.
And so overall is a level of service D.
C.
You said?
C as in car.
C, gotcha.
C. Overall level of service C. Yes.
C, gotcha. Okay. Mr. Mayor, I have other questions, but I'll pass it on.
Okay, yeah, I'll come back to you after other councils have had an opportunity. So I'm going to switch around a little bit, and I'll go to Mr. Matthews to my left right now.
I have nothing right now, Mr. Mayor. I'm kind of taking in what everybody's saying here.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll come back to Mr. Singleton then.
Okay, what are the average daily trips that are going to be coming from this development, 1,050 units, on Garner Road and on Creech Road?
Okay. Average daily trips on, so overall, the development is about 4,500 daily trips. We are anticipating that 15% of that would be on Creech Road. And let me just, so that is about 675 vehicles. And the rest of that would be on East Garner Road. So 85%, so about 3,800 vehicles on, and those are rough round numbers that we are anticipating.
The last numbers that we were showing here on Garner Road was 11,000 average daily trips. Right. So we're getting ready to increase it 35% with one development. Yes. I already know. Most time I ask these, I didn't know these numbers, but I'm going to ask the question. I usually know the answer, so I make sure I'm getting it straight. So we're going to increase the traffic on Garner Road by 35%. Okay. I got more questions, but you answered most of that there. One quick question on the improvements at Access Site 1 in East Garner Road. There will be coming in one lane in, but going out there will be a right and a left turn there. I'm leaving the driveway of the proposed property. It'll be a right turn lane and a left turn lane. I'm not talking about Garner Road. Okay, just one lane in, but 2 lanes out. Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Behringer.
Yes. What do you anticipate the build-out to be? How long the build-out will take?
In our traffic study, we anticipated a 2029 build-out year.
So 5.5 years, something like that. Okay, another question is, you mentioned cost escalation will be part of the developer's responsibility. We've had several applications come in, projects come in that are on hold now because of cost escalation. How is that possibly going to affect this development?
It's a good question. So this project, obviously, there are any number of factors that go into the cost. So a lot of them are transportation improvements. There's a lot that goes into that parkland. And then there's also just, the development itself, the multifamily. So it's all a push and pull, right? So we can't predict everything. What we've tried to do with the development agreement is require the transportation improvements and the grading of the parkland at certain increments that happens earlier in the project. Ultimately, I guess what we did that's different than recent development agreement is we didn't set a deadline. Like if you weren't able to achieve milestones, then the developer's obligation expires or they pay some amount. The term is 15 years, and so it allows it to happen under the milestones that are considered. So the development can't get ahead of those improvements, and there's not also a backdoor option to avoid them. But you're right, it's something that we're looking at to address concerns about cost escalation. It's really about achieving a density that allows you to support those costs. That's the best way we can protect it, is to ensure that there's the income stream necessary to support those costs.
So you're projecting 5 to 5.5 years, but it could go as long as 15.
Yeah, it could. It's allowed to. I think the idea is to do it as quickly as possible, but the development agreement allows things to, if for whatever reason, unknown circumstances, the obligations aren't extinguished.
Okay, Mr. Dallinger.
On the traffic theme, what are the average daily trips for Creech Road now? I didn't see that in the information.
Pull that up. 5,000 vehicles per day is what I have.
You said this will generate 4,500 daily trips. This development built out.
Along Creech Road. Along Creech Road, it would be 15%. We aren't anticipating all of that traffic to utilize Creech Road. Only about 15% of the site's traffic would utilize Creech. The rest of the traffic would be utilizing New Rant.
How many total daily trips are generated from this development at build out regardless of what road they take out.
That was that 4,500 number.
So explain to me how 1,000 units, 2,200 people only generate 4,500 trips a day, when I think the standard is 7 to 10, usually 8 or 9 trips per day.
So you are thinking of the difference between a single-family home, which is typically what that in the ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual, which is the standard that we all use. That's the standard that towns require us to use in the NCDOT. There are different land use codes for different types of homes. And so a single-family home, yes, does generate approximately 9 vehicle trips a day. And single-family homes they are typically larger. They typically have more deliveries to their houses. They typically have, yard maintenance. They also typically have more people living there. They might have a teenager with a vehicle. And what this development has is multifamily and townhomes. So multifamily and townhomes typically, and this is data that has been gathered by hundreds of entities and submitted to this Institute of Transportation Engineers, where they compile the data, they source it, they make sure that it is all peer-reviewed and it is all as accurate as possible. And the latest edition came out in 2021. That's the edition that we are on. And this is the data that we use that, and in this instance, so the townhomes and the apartments just generate fewer trips than those single-family homes. And since this latest edition in 2021 came out, there were some data points that were post-COVID that had some of that teleworking that we're seeing now. So there are fewer people who are leaving their house every day to go into work. There are some people who are working from home. And then also in these types of communities, it is typically there's walkability as well. So that's why that, you probably have heard traffic engineers come up before you and mention that 9 trips per day. But now we're looking at, it's oftentimes closer to 6 or so trips a day.
Still not 6. 45 is still not 6. It's significantly higher than 4,500 even at 6. So that's why I'm asking where the 45 came from, because that's like 2 trips a day.
Here, let me pull up.
That's just going there and back, like leaving and coming back. That's,
So I do apologize. We have done a couple of iterations of this traffic study. The original submittal of the TIA was the 4,500 trips a day. The latest edition, I really do apologize for saying the wrong number originally. We are closer to 6,600, and that was an addendum that was submitted in the summer to the town. That's my error in saying these numbers.
So you need to recalculate all the traffic for Creech Road.
We did
Garner
submit
Road.
these. I was reading off the level of service. We did mitigate everything based on those level of services. Level service D and C, those are correct. I was just reading the wrong chart.
So if I could clarify, so the mitigation required and the level of service is based on the correct numbers, but when we were calculating estimated numbers, that was just using the prior count, but it doesn't change the results of the TIA.
So on that number, that's at 4,900 trips added to Garner Road would put it over 15,000 trips per day, which is over capacity for that kind of road. And then if the rest of that traffic went over, it'd start getting Creech Road closer to the 10,000. Okay. That's helpful. I have more questions for later.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Let me go back to Mr. Vance. I believe he wanted to have a follow-up.
Can you take just the, can you take short period of time, just to explain level of service, what it means, basic, no long details about A, B, C, D, and what that means in this whole process. Then I have another question following on with that.
Yeah, sure. So level of service is the standard that we use, and it is based on a big manual. It's called the Highway Capacity Manual, again, peer-reviewed and all of that. What it does is it uses the configuration of the intersections, the lane width or the laneage of the intersections and the type of traffic control, so whether it's a signal, stop controlled, that type of thing, and the traffic volumes. And we have a software called Synchro that we plug everything into, and it spits it out. And the level of service is based on a range between the delay per vehicle. So I do have a chart that I can, if you are interested in how much.
I just wanted to know, for example, A is the best, B is next best,
Yes, A
C,
is the best.
C.
It goes A, B, C, D, E, which you don't see in typical letter grades, but we do have level service E, and then F is failing, and there's nothing beyond that.
Okay, so C is considered what?
C, so NCDOT wants all of their roads to be level of service D or better. They consider that an acceptable level of service. So from a traffic engineering perspective, C is very acceptable.
Okay, and that is what Garner Road will operate at if this project goes through at full bill out.
East Garner Road and Creech Road, that intersection will operate a level service C. East Garner Road and New Rand Road, with that new signal, it will operate a level service D.
D.
So
Okay.
it's still acceptable in the state's eyes.
Got it. Will there be improvement at the intersection of East Garner Road and Creech Road at full build out?
East Garner Road and Creech Road?
Yes.
That one is C, level
Is-
service C.
Is currently C?
It is currently C in the
So it
site.
stays the same?
Yeah,
Okay.
it stays the same.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
The
All
site's not expected to degrade that intersection.
Okay, all right. I have no more questions about the traffic piece, but now I have another question in reference to consideration. This is for Mr. Marsh. In reference to, thank you for that explanation. In reference to consideration possibly of, we talked about discussing affordable housing, workforce housing in this whole process. Before I get to that point, looking at the number of apartments, 700 apartments, that's in my mind, that's a pretty large number. And the consideration of how to incorporate possibly affordable housing and workforce housing into this whole project.
Yeah, we took note of comments from yourself and from others and the need for workforce housing in Garner, and we've done an analysis, and we're prepared to work with staff to put a firm commitment in writing. And with all the details, there's a lot of nuance with workforce housing, how it works, but essentially, it's a little speculative on our part in that the apartments would ultimately be marketed, and so we take a little risk because we're not doing the full pro forma. But what we've determined we're comfortable doing is a combination of units that we'd be willing to offer under the current development scenario with the current densities proposed, which is for the multifamily units, we would have a combination of affordability levels. So we understand that the workforce housing target is roughly around 120% AMI. Looking at rental levels, and we think we can do a little better than that. So we would propose seven units at 100% AMI and 7 units at 80% AMI, and it would essentially be done on a percentage basis so that you're providing each unit the required number of units within phase. So it'd be a total of 14 units at full build out with those restrictions.
14?
Yes, sir.
14 apartments?
Yes, sir.
Out of currently 700 apartments?
Correct.
A lot of apartments already. A lot of them. Okay.
Okay, I'll move around, let everybody get another chance if need be. Mr. Matthews, anything from you yet, sir?
Not right yet.
Okay. Mr. Singleton, are you ready yet, or I can come back to you?
14 apartments to 700 is 2%. Just getting back to these traffic numbers again. So with the 6,600 average daily, that's 5,610 trips at 85% on Garner Road. So that increases traffic on Garner Road by 50%. One project, 50%. Now, from a population standpoint, I didn't mean, you didn't have to come up here. I'm just repeating the numbers that you've already given me. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother you to get you up here. I asked staff several weeks ago to give me the number of residential units north of Garner Road. It was approximately 2,300. Based off our census data, 2.5 people, which we saw in this report in the Garner Forward Plan, that's 750 residents. So if you look at 1,045 townhomes and apartments, or 1,050, whichever one it is, at 2.5, that's 2,600 plus people. So not only are we increasing the traffic by 50%, you're increasing the population by 45%. I think this is my biggest concern to this issue is the density. North Garner, you need foot traffic, but we just built a rec center over there that's bringing thousands of trips a week to there, right beside, where they need more foot traffic. That's a part of the puzzle. There are lots of pieces like residential, I agree. But the density we're talking about is just, there's nothing like it. I lived in North Garner for 12 years, right beside North Garner Middle School on Bryan Street. I know Ms. Behringer has lived there many years, 30 years or more probably. So it's the density that I had the biggest issue with. That's a lot. You're taking the north of Garner Road is from Ashland subdivision all the way to Cloverdale, and in between you got Weston Road and Avery Park and older part of Garner and School Acres and so forth and so on, and and Cloverdale. But we're going to increase it 50% in the traffic in one 96-acre location, which is really concerning. What's also concerning is other proposals on Creech Road, but I'll get to them later. That's not what we're talking with you about. So that's my biggest concern. You're going to increase traffic on Garner Road by 50%, and we're going to increase the population by about 45%. That's a lot. The impact is just, that's a lot. In one area, in one part of town, the older part of town, that sure needs some other residential opportunities. But that's strong. That's just, in my opinion, that's way too strong. That's me.
And if I may just touch on that briefly, density is always a challenging subject, especially in a town that's growing as quickly as Garner. A couple thoughts I have on that, which is one, that these people are coming to Garner one way or another. It's growing at a rapid pace. I think if you don't build the units, they may go further outside, and then you're going to have people using your streets that aren't actually living in your town. So the growth is coming to Wake County, and a lot of it's coming to Garner. And I think there's going to be a demand for residential units for the long term. So when we look to see how to address that, you look within your town and you find places where density is appropriate. And we just passed a comprehensive plan that says that this is one of those locations where density is appropriate. And so I think that's critical, because if you're going to be strategic with where you put it, you want to commit to it, because if you come in under in some of those places, it's going to start putting strain where you get into the periphery where maybe density isn't appropriate, and you're going to see a lot of requests that ask for more density than was otherwise required because the demand is there. So I think just in a general market standpoint, there is a need for density in the right locations. And if there is a right location in Garner, it's right near your main street, where you can bring people to support the businesses downtown, and you can bring them where they can walk. I appreciate the concerns and the amount of growth with that. When we look at this site and we look at how the project has evolved, the project has also evolved to have major commitments in a number of facets: parks and recreation commitments, transportation improvements, pedestrian improvements that go above and beyond most projects. To support those improvements, to be able to fund them from the developer, we need to be able to have the income stream. And so as we start to reduce density, we understand the concerns, but if we as a development team leave this meeting saying density needs to come down and those things need to change, we're also going to have to look at the commitments that we're offering with this project and see if those need to be scaled back, if those need to be changed. Because it's all one big equation. And so when we lose the income stream, you lose the ability to provide other benefits. So I appreciate the concern, and I think that, obviously on behalf of the developer, I can argue for density in this location, but I do think that if we've got something to refer to that gives us guidance, we look to the comprehensive plan, and it is selective for locations like this, that if you're going to be strategic and put it somewhere, this is the place.
I understand, and y'all have been very open about the infrastructure improvements, and I appreciate that. But the question that gets to me is, do you trade off $3 or $4 or $5 million in infrastructure improvements for that much density? That's how you got to weigh it. you trade off the improvements for 50% more traffic on Garner Road. I mean, Ms. Mark Behringer, walks on it often and tells us about how much traffic there is and how much they're speeding and throwing trash out the window. I'm serious. I'm just saying what she's for years. This just happened last week. She's been saying this a year. So that's the biggest concern I have is the traffic. We've got a lot of issues with Creeks Road, and that intersection which is none of your doing, is tough. It's a tough intersection. It's so narrow. For 3 lanes, it's tough, but I appreciate I get your points. You're right. To pay for the improvements, you got to have density to help create the income stream. I understand that. Appreciate it. I'll move on.
Okay, thank you, Mr. England. I'm going to go back this way. Mr. Behringer, it'll be your turn.
A couple of questions. Do you envision any of the units being owner-occupied rather than rental?
So the townhomes would be envisioned as owner-occupied. The apartments would not be.
And the commercial development that I saw on the aerial of the plan, it shows like four places. Is that just a picture, or are there going to be more than 4 possibilities there?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the building orientation is a bit of a placeholder. Retail leasing is hard to come by until you have a plan. They just don't lease out that early, unlike the residential market. So it's tough for us to predict exactly what's going to go there. What we try to do is define an area and then create conditions that support a specific type of development that we thought was most appropriate. So it's not set in stone, that orientation, but I think the general location is the biggest confirmed commitment, as well as the architectural details.
There's a possibility of more than just 4 commercial places.
Yeah, so the way the PUD's written, there's a cap at 20,000 square feet of residential. A lot of that's traffic driven. If we're talking traffic, non-residential ends up kind of tipping the scales quite a bit. So that was to inform the TIA to put that cap in place.
And Mr. Dellinger, coming back that way.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on the workforce housing, and anything related to workforce housing is going to have to be a part of that development agreement. No, it's not a question. I'm saying that to be encompassed.
I think appropriately be a zoning condition that we would voluntarily offer.
The issue is you don't have a developer for the apartments yet. Some have some concerns about that you're kicking that can onto another project that may or may not bite on that. And that could be 2030, 2032. To Mr. Singleton's point about lower density, when you lower the amount of residential density, you increase the opportunity for more commercial, more open space preservation. We don't need more people. With more people, you're bringing a lot of people, but you're not bringing in a lot of amenities shopping wise. I just spent however many months talking with folks, and they're like, I don't want to have to leave Garner to do this, that, and the other. We have 100 acres. 100 acres, we have to ask ourselves, is this the best use of 100 acres in North Garner, right across from our existing old downtown and 5 minutes from downtown Raleigh? People don't want to have to leave Garner. The other issue is the density. Even if the density is appropriate, the form of the density is not. The townhomes are not appropriate for fiscal elements that we need for the town. You need your cash flow. The town needs its cash flow, and there are better building forms. Even if you're going to cram 2,000 people in there, the question we need to ask is, what form should that development take? Townhomes, owner-occupied. We need a mix of owner-occupied in the town and rental in the town. But once you start putting owner-occupied townhomes on the ground, they're there for 50 years. We're locking our tax base in to probably some of the best real estate in the town to townhomes. So, again, to the density question, and you mentioned the Garner Forward plan we just adopted and you're gung-ho about says 3 to 5 stories. It doesn't mean 3-story townhomes, because it's a nod to density and verticality to create more open space, to create more tree preservation, to get higher value structures for our tax base. Again, vertical residential is more room for commercial. So I think form-wise and from a fiscal standpoint, there's not been the appropriate fiscal analysis by the town on the impact of this project as a townhome project with a maybe apartment component that comes later. The apartment component may never come, because you're developed the townhome part, the other is just icing on the cake. So it might sit there for 10 years and not get developed. and they were still having to deliver services and all this other stuff. So I have a lot of concerns with just the form. I have a lot of concerns too with the fee in lieu structure. Yes, there are the ball fields, but when you go back and read the old UDO, there's a process that this development agreement tries to usurp with regards to recommendations for land dedication, which would be a lot more than 7 acres, and the actual fee itself. I think the most fascinating, kind of disturbing thing about the development agreement is there's not a single dollar sign in the whole thing. There are no numbers. There are no calculations. There's nothing in here. And that's a hot conversation for the development agreement. But that fee in lieu, it sounds good on the surface, but what are we giving up? Because we're tying the hands of the Planning Commission and Parks and Rec to make their concrete recommendations on land dedication. And when you start doing calculations, the calculations in here aren't as favorable, in the development agreement, aren't as favorable to the town as the calculations in the UDO. And I get just put on the brakes and say, which one is actually better for the town? I also have concerns with the open space requirement. We've had this with the couple of other projects where, particularly the PUDs and the PRDs, where it's very difficult to determine which part of the project is supposed to be counted and is counted towards open space or tree preservation, active recreation. So that's kind of you're going to have to work with staff on delineating that better, because there's some very concrete language in the PUD with regards to counting bodies of water, what you can and can't count, and also the percentages themselves and the width and size of those open space areas. And the 401 crossing, I won't do what Gray did, but it's sort of similar in that it's not really meeting the spirit of the PUD. Now, you take that 25% preservation that's required, and then you take into account what the Planning Commission and Parks and Rec might recommend on land dedication, and this becomes a totally different project. And that may be a good thing, it may be a bad thing. I think it'll be a good thing for the town, but I think those are things we need to examine at a staff level, because the UDO, as it's written, is very favorable to the town. And so I have concerns about the development agreement short-circuiting our opportunities and flexibility with that. Those are the main issues. I think the density it's kind of a town decision. How many people do we need? What can we support? And what's the fiscal impact on the town? So those are my only comments right now.
I'll touch on those just briefly. You mentioned the apartments being icing on the cake. They're absolutely not icing on the cake. They are a critical component to make this project work and to pencil out in all facets. We don't have somebody on board, we don't have a signed agreement, but they're being marketed and we're trying to do that. So they're critical to make this work for the developer, and it's a risk that they're taking on, obviously. You made a good comment, which I couldn't articulate better, which is putting affordable restrictions on units where we're not developing them and we're marketing them is a big risk. But we're willing to do it because it's important, but it's a risk that we're taking on, and we're trying to evaluate how much can we do without scaring everybody away and killing the ability. So that's the balance we have to take, and why we looked at how many units are feasible, and we made a calculated judgment that that was the appropriate amount. I appreciate your commentary on density, and that maybe townhomes aren't the density that's envisioned. I will say the comprehensive plan calls for a mix of residential types, and so you don't want to have all one type. What I'm hearing you saying from a cost of services standpoint is that the site across the board would be something more dense than apartments, and incorporating open space to make that up. But in the end, if that's going to develop, what you're talking about is not 1,000 units. You're going to end up talking about 2,000, 3,000 if it's all multifamily.
The same number of units, you just reconfigure them in a different way. It's the same number of people. That's the tipping point, right? If we're going to have this number of people, what's the best way for that number of people to come to Garner?
Understood. So I appreciate that distinction. I do think a mix of residential types creates more opportunity for different people to come to one location. I think a 90-acre site exclusively of apartments with commercial mixed in, I think realistically that's not feasible, and it's not the best use of a site this size. But I think we could agree to disagree on that point. I can talk a little bit more about the fee in lieu, and I can cover it in the development agreement. But the open space calculations are, I think, still within the rezoning. We have gone through the code with staff. We've got McAdams, who has done any number of projects with the town, and I'm 100% confident that we'll meet those requirements, that we've met them, and you can rest assured that ultimately this is interpreted under your code, so they have to be met. So, but that has been reviewed by staff and it's been reviewed by engineers, so I'm confident that would be met. But when we're looking at the site and the appropriate use of density and open space, what I think shouldn't be lost is that we had a project that had more open space 5 months ago. We were asked to figure out how to put baseball fields, to provide baseball fields for the town. So 7 acres that could otherwise have been used for this site, we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars figuring out how to make those baseball fields for the town. So when we're talking about having things too compact without open space, don't lose sight that we're dedicating land for baseball fields and preparing for those for the town. So I know there's parts of the development agreement that make that equation complicated, but that is part of this project that I don't think should be lost in the discussion. I can talk again about the support for the fee in lieu, but I think maybe it'd be better to go through that in the presentation and then have more questions on that point.
I'll give Mr. Vance the last.
Okay, all right. In reference to the number of apartments, and in my mind there, I appreciate the consideration and what you've done with the workforce and affordable housing piece, and looking at the numbers of 700 maximum units. That's still, in my mind, a lot of apartments for this area. And knowing that if this is approved, that this is a transformative project for the North Garner area, and the consideration of reducing that would be, I hope it's considered, reducing that 700 max. And also possibly I heard about the commercial piece and this area being a draw for not only residents of Garner, but also for those who would like to come to Garner, and possibly increasing that square footage of commercial area in there as well, and consider a reduction in the number of apartments in that area. Is what I'm just saying out loud now in the early form and consideration for other entities who will have to review this in the very near future, hopefully, that to consider reduction in the apartment units and also increase in commercial. That's all I have.
Okay, so we've had a couple rounds, several questions for Mr. Marsh. Go ahead, Mr. Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I try to do a lot of listening and hear what everybody's got to say. And our county is growing. We all know. It depends on who you want to listen to, but somewhere around 80 people a day. If you don't believe it, we can go to Cary, we could go to Fuquay, we could go to Holly Springs, Wake Forest, and see all the travel issues, traffic issues. They're everywhere. It's not unique to Garner. Garner just happens to be a good place to be, and people are finding that out and they're wanting to come. That's the reason we've got a new Veterans Hospital being built. We got Wake Med coming over here with a 200-bed facility, Duke Medical, and much more is going to be coming. We are growing, and not only is it traffic. If you've been watching the news, the schools have got issues. Where are kids going to go now? We've lived here all our life. Now our son's got to go over here junior, senior year. There's all kinds of issues associated with growth, and we've selected a lot of them tonight. My colleagues have, and I appreciate what they brought to the table and the questions asked, because I don't profess to know everything, but I've seen it from the town side, and serving as a Wake County Commissioner and a chairman for my final year, I've seen what it does county-wide, and we're just running out of space. But you know, I'm appreciative of the workforce housing that y'all have come up with. That's the first time anybody's offered that up to us. Maybe the numbers weren't where we wanted them, but hey, we're getting a start here. We're seeing a lot of new things starting to happen. Roads and intersection under John Sausage Road is, we're looking at that road around for some major changes there to help traffic, as well as down White Oak. So then we're talking about traffic studies, and I know they can be all over the gambit. When you pull out your driveway, are you going to your left or are you going to your right or you're taking a right and going into Raleigh, not coming down this area. So there's a lot of what ifs, and you're not going to build out to sitting right around 29, 28. So it's not going to be something that's going to happen tomorrow. A lot can happen between now and then. But and plus this is going to be good for our downtown merchants. I've had a lot of feedback from them. So we need this business downtown, and it's going to stimulate a lot of growth downtown as well as White Oak. White Oak is growing by leaps and bounds, and the good Lord willing, we're going to get a good food store out there one day, so everybody don't have to go all over the world to go somewhere besides a food line. But having said all that, but I like what you're looking at on the intersection, the upgrades of the intersections, which are badly needed. And I think y'all going to put, you said close to $3 million, it might have been more, in roads on Old Garner Road, 3-laning it, stoplights, intersections, things that are badly needed, because you could get killed out there in a moment's notice try and get out of that on that road at any given time. So having said all of this, and the ball fields, I think that's so great. One thing we've also said, we can't get enough baseball fields. Here's going to be 2. Y'all going to grade them to level. It's going to be a lot of expense hauling all that dirt off. I know it's very expensive by a cubic yard or how you measure it, but to get 2 ball fields, not counting water and sewer into our new park coming out there, it's going to free up a lot of money to do some other things. So yes, there's trade-offs. We try to mix a little common sense with it, and everybody on this board have got those little things we like to earmark and go after, and they're all good things. I'm not putting anybody down, but I think every community in Wake County is picking projects apart right now. They're trying to figure what's the best for the town, what can we do to make this work, because people are coming. This happening. A lot of traffic's coming from out of Garner. It's coming from Johnson County, down from Clayton. If you don't believe it, get on 7 to go east any given morning, not counting from Durham and any other way. But we've got some tough decisions to make here. But one thing I will say, and try and do this in a meaningful and a common sense way, is as developers, and I have no personal interest in this, in you guys, but y'all have stepped up to the plate. We have worked close together. We've worked with our attorney, our staff, and tried to come up with good, reasonable things so we could work together. Is it a perfect world? No. But when we can sit down and have dialogue with staff, with our attorneys and our planning board and all this, have a good dialogue and try to make good decisions to come together on some things, that's a good thing. If we can do that with all of our developers, we're ahead of the game, because every project is going to come in, there's going to be ups and downs on it. So, Mr. Mayor, that's all I'm saying. And sure, I think there's a lot to consider here. I would encourage my colleagues to think about, because it could be a whole lot worse of a product. And these folks have stepped up and are still working things and working with our attorney. And I think we've got a very sharp attorney that if there's something wrong, she's going to spot it a mile off. So I've got a lot of confidence in her. But having said all that, that's all I'm going to say,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
One item I'm just going to put up here, because this is an item we have to think about,
Okay, go ahead.
because it's happened.
Okay.
Roughly 2,600 residents would come here, 2.5 per, based off demographics. That's 600 school-age kids, 18 and under. 600. Now, if you break them up by grade or by school, that's roughly 300 elementary, 150, 150. Where they can go to school? Creech Road and East Garner Elementary are full. 300 elementary students is half a school in Wake County. Remember that. Think about this now. As old as I am, we've got 2 middle schools in Garner, north and east. It used to be junior high, and I went to East Garner Junior High in the 70s. And it's 2023, and guess how many junior highs we still have in Garner? 2. We have doubled elementaries from 4 to 8 and high schools from 1 to 2.5, because a lot of Garner kids are going to Southeast Raleigh. We still don't have the middle school. So that's something to think about. If we're going to do this, and all these other projects that are proposed on Creech Road, where they can go to school, because with those projects, I've done the numbers, it'll be over 600 young kids. You need another new school. So that's just something to remember, is where they're going to go to school. Just throwing it out there.
Okay.
And all those kids won't go to public schools, I realize that.
By the way, as old as you are, you're not as old as me yet. But anyway, that's okay.
You said it, not me.
I know. So, Mr. Marsh, did I understand you said you had another, I'll call it an element of your presentation that you wanted to make? I'm about to suggest that we take a breath and take a break. This is a public hearing, and I know there are people out there who also want to have an opportunity to speak on this but want to give you time to complete your full presentation. I understood you had at least something else you wanted.
We have slides on the development agreement and some information that might answer some of Mr. Dellinger's questions, but if the council wants to take a recess, happy to start that up after the recess.
Yeah, why don't we do that, and let's try to keep the break to 15 minutes, no more than that. So we need to come back close to 7:30, I would say, and earlier if we get everybody back in here. So we'll go from there. Thank you, sir. Okay. session after a recess. Before I go back to Mr. Marsh, I'd like to find out how many of you are here for this public hearing and you have some desire to speak on this topic tonight. Could you just raise your hand for me, if you will, at this point? Anybody else? Not sure. No, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, as I said before, we want to try to go ahead and move to a conclusion. Obviously, the main thing will be that this will be referred to the Planning Commission on the one issue there, the rezoning for sure. But Mr. Marsh, I will bring you back up, sir, for your further presentation, and then see if council has questions on that. And then I'd like to get to the public, give folks, there aren't that many, a chance to speak on this. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll do my best to keep it brief. That's not my strongest skill, as I've already rambled on. But this is the development agreement. And just to summarize the terms, Ms. Jones did a good job of hitting the high notes. But there are a couple of features of the development that needed to be considered with the development agreement. A lot of it related to the transportation improvements, the connection, the collector street going through Garner Recreational Park to Creech Road. Because that involves town property, we need the appropriate permission and cooperation with the town to get that done. In connection with that land going through town property, it triggers this parkland swap process with the National Park Service, so it's meant to account for that. Then in other areas, it just addresses easements and, again, town support to make sure that we can deliver on the transportation and infrastructure improvements. Kind of adding to the layers would then be the park expansion and the baseball fields and how we can account for that and achieve that through the development agreement. And finally, we ask in recognition for some of the improvements that go above and beyond for those baseball fields that we get some reimbursement or some fee credit for those. So this slide just summarizes the developer obligations. They fall into three categories: the transportation improvements, which we've covered in the rezoning, but they're the collector street and the TIA improvements. So they're obligated under the development agreement too. Parks and rec improvements. So this talks about, again, those multi-use paths, the baseball fields, and it addresses that land swap process. And then utilities, because there is a major extension of public utilities and sanitary sewer to the northern property line of Jurgen Park, because we were bringing it down and then we're going to get it over to the town park. We estimate that that's actually about $1 million in savings to the town by doing it with this project. And there were prior plans where the town was going to do that on their own that would no longer be necessary. It was going to address sewer on the town's own initiative. Town obligations, not quite as lengthy, but equally significant, and transportation requires kind of the town support to get those easements to allow us to complete those improvements, to dedicate that land for that extension through the park, and then to where we're unable to get necessary right-of-way for the many improvements, just to help with that process. How it differs with this development agreement compared to another is that, again, we're not asking for a deadline for us to acquire and to trigger condemnation, and if it doesn't work, then obligations are extinguished. Instead, what we do is use reasonable efforts and demonstrate to the town that we've done everything we can to get necessary right away. And if we are unable to after establishing that, then town uses its condemnation powers and we cover all those costs. So a little bit more of just kind of a collaborative process, which I think is consistent with the spirit of this project. Parks and Rec, again, just helping with the recreation land itself. So if we're going to grade and do all the designs for those ball fields, we obviously want the town's guidance as to what you actually want there. So that's what that talks to. We do need the town to apply for that national parks land swap process. You may recall from Ms. Jones' presentation, there's a 45-day timeline to get that filed after the rezoning. And that timeline is especially critical. It may seem like a quick turnaround, but the reason being that we need to find out right away if we're going to be able to get that road across Garner Recreational Park, because without that road, none of those units are being built because you don't have your two access points and the house of cards falls apart. So it's a critical component, something we have confidence will get done, but it needs to get done right away so that the project can get going. And then the credit for that fee in lieu, which I think warrants some discussion. So the whole fee in lieu credit discussion relates to these Garner Recreational Park improvements. And the nature of this request is that we are providing the land and dedicating the land for those ball fields. That was land that was originally tagged for multifamily and townhome development. As council knows, that's valuable land. It's in high demand. And rather than try and pursue a swap and get some town land to recover that, we went ahead and just try to figure out how to make it all work within this site. But then going beyond that, when Robert did all the analysis with a number of engineers and consultants as to how this would all work, he engaged design consultants and did grading studies to figure out what could work, looking at a number of different spots. It became pretty clear to us that there's a substantial benefit to the town if we went above and beyond that dedication of land and actually set it up so that the town can use it. So we would actually design it. We would engage the design professionals. We would make sure that that land is designed, built to specifications so that when the town's ready for baseball fields and wants to put them in, the land is ready. So we went above and beyond to do that. And so we're asking for a credit towards parks and rec fees that we would otherwise have to pay because we're going above and beyond for those baseball fields. In connection with that, there are some impacts to our project that are a result of those changes that we think, at least, if not in a pure monetary standpoint, at least for the spirit of this request, need to be understood. So by adding in those baseball fields, when we talk about, providing open space within the development, there are 7 acres that were originally envisioned to be developed that have been set aside for this, and we've kind of made things more compact in places. That leads to some pinch points within the development that actually escalate some costs. We ended up losing a stormwater pond to make this all work. It results in upsizing of other stormwater ponds. And while that may seem like a modest increase, what it really means is for the larger stormwater pond, you end up having to build retaining walls, which is a pretty significant escalation. Those stormwater ponds would also need to account, or would be able to account for some of the town's own property. But also not to be lost in the whole equation is the substantial effort that's already gone into this. Not something we're necessarily seeking, but a 5-month process of hundreds of thousands of dollars in analysis and work on that is actually occurred to this point. And we tried to figure that out on our own, not only the money spent, but the time spent with carrying costs and putting risk on this project approaching some financial deadlines. So just want to make sure, just when we understand the nature of this request, kind of the spirit is the effort that we've gone to make this work, and I think it is going above and beyond. Now, the actual support for the reimbursement, or the credit towards fees, probably makes sense to take a step back, I think, for everyone's benefit to understand how the process works. But the town's ordinance provides that for residential units, you have for each residential unit, X amount of parkland should be dedicated. And then North Carolina law authorizes that in lieu of actually dedicating land, it's appropriate for a municipality to charge a fee in lieu of dedication. So you might look at a single family neighborhood and say, no, don't just carve off a section and make it a park. We don't need a park here. Just go ahead and pay a fee in lieu of that dedication. We'll use those funds towards future parkland. And so those fees are meant to account for an equal contribution. So those fees are calculated based on the town's code as to how much each unit is worth as far as a fee. So you get a total amount, what the fee would be for this overall project. Whatever that amount is, all we're asking for in the course of this credit is the cost that we can demonstrate that are directly related to essentially that going above and beyond to make these baseball fields real. That's what we'd ask for a credit towards. And so we put in that first category the actual, I think, what would be documented. Now, it's going to be a little tricky to do this. And so we're hoping to have a little kind of leeway with the council. And I understand that there will be some concern with documenting it. But a lot of this, when we talk about the cost that we incur to do this, they're going to be absorbed into overall project costs. And they're going to be done years down the road in the future when you have the grading plans done, when everything's set in stone and a site plan's approved. So I can't stand here today and say the grading cost for this site and the cost to develop this land is going to be X, because we don't have site plan approval. We don't know what other changes are going to be made. So we're trying to use reasonable estimations at this point to give the council confidence that the costs that we're bearing on this are going to be, far and above what that rec fee would otherwise be. I think we can demonstrate that, but it's going to take some work with the town attorney to give you all the confidence, and I know that that's on our plate. So don't expect you all to take me on my word. But that land itself was one of the factors raised by the town, the value of that dedicated land. Again, it was to be multifamily land, but now for other uses. the design work to make those baseball fields work would be accounted for it, and then the actual construction costs. There is it's a minor extension of utilities to Garner Recreational Park that goes with it, where we have the opportunity to do it, might as well do it. That's a small component of the overall request. And then, as I mentioned, those stormwater facilities and the changes the impacts from this project. Not something we specifically ask for, not something that we're trying to do in accounting and say we want credits for this, but not to be lost in the equation are town savings that will be achieved by having the developer do it. Any number of efficiencies are achieved by having the town's grading and ball field work done in connection with a larger profit. Just kind of think the volume-wise work and the rates that we may be able to achieve. We could likely do it at a much lower cost than the town would if it was a standalone project. Similar, the stormwater retention for some of the town facilities could then be handled on our site in connection with those grading plans. This is one's like, I guess, a little fluid, but in theory, land would have to be rezoned by the town for park. I don't think that that's a major topic, but we're trying to address it within one project. And then, again, bringing utilities to the park property is something worth noting. Public benefits, I think this just goes to the overall project as well as as what's encompassed in the development agreement. But not to be lost in this whole discussion is that expansion of Garner Recreational Park. We had what we thought was a pretty solid project back in July, and we're throwing a little bit of a curveball, but I think that we've all worked together to come up with something that's even better, that brings what we understand to be much needed baseball fields to the town. And I think also what I've learned is critically important, ones of the right size. So these are the big ones. Whatever the big ones are, these are them. The ones that you don't have, those are being brought in with this project. Transportation improvements we've gone through already, but they are significant. I think this is an example, although we appreciate that there are traffic issues in the area, this is a project that has major improvements that provide benefits that you wouldn't realize without it and go above and beyond the typical project. Talked about the extension of sewer and the savings that provides. I think it is significant if you can, shortly after passing your comprehensive plan, to be able to achieve a major milestone and having a redevelopment this close to, or a major development this close to your downtown area. And then a big issue and something that we've heard about, we've talked with folks on Main Street and some of the business owners. This type of project will provide a lot of energy, will provide foot traffic, will provide a lot of benefits for Main Street and Garner. Just kind of summarizing it all up, project timeline, it has been going on since June of 2022. We've gone through 6 rounds of submission and any number of rounds of review. We reached the point in July where we took a little bit of a detour to figure out these ball fields and have gone through that process as well, and kind of hope that we have an understanding as to how that inclusion affects the project, and that what we're proposing is necessary to support the addition of those ball fields. We did have an extra neighborhood meeting, not required, but I think always good practice, because we want to make sure that folks are up to date. So it brings us to November, where we are today, and just want to make sure that we can get this project moving forward and start to deliver on some of the major promises and benefits of this project. So thank you.
Thanks, sir, for your extensive reminder of several items that brought us to where we are tonight. And so, council, unless there are pressing questions you need to ask, I want us to move to any public comments on the matter, and then, as I said, we'll be asked to take this matter to the Planning Commission as a next step, and then we'll move from there. So, are there any?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do have some questions. One, what is the land dedication number that the UDO could potentially require of this project?
So I can pull the calculations out. I don't have them offhand, but there's a per unit requirement.
0.0287 per unit, right? Which comes out to how many acres?
I'd imagine you've done the calculation, so why don't you just tell me?
28 acres.
28
The
acres.
town could potentially ask for in land dedication. What's the number on the fee in lieu?
So the fee in lieu is dependent on the number of units, and so the acreage you're assuming is the maximum number of units under the development if developed. The fee in lieu, I think the ballpark was $1.7 million from prior estimations.
I came up with. We're going to have to research that, because that is not the same number that I came up with. On the fee in lieu, I think the town and Parks and Rec and every town manager, and just, I really have problems with the development agreement and that there are no numbers in here. There are no estimates. It's like, we'll give you estimates. There are no estimates, no dollar signs in this presentation on, there's occasional, this is $1 million to the town, this is not. We have to have more firm numbers to know. It's like a peek in the dark over here at some savings, but what's the cost? What's the opportunity cost? That land dedication number is highly significant. What if Parks and Rec came back and said, we want 20 acres to do X, Y, and Z, but we're getting 7 from you? Well, we're getting less than we would have, so how do we make up that difference? What's the value of that land? Cost per acre to acquire new parkland, times that multiplier, times the fee in lieu. I mean, we don't have numbers in front of us, and I feel like the development agreement is, like I said earlier, designed to usurp a process that the town has for making those dedication and fee in lieu determinations. And I think that needs to be, just need to get with the attorney and remove some pieces of this and get hard numbers from staff. 7 acres dedication sounds good, but it says here, public recreation facilities dedicated for public use and ownership as part of an approved residential development, such as facilities and not grading, right? It says we can grant a credit. We may consider granting a credit against required fee in lieu, but it's talking about actually the creation of facilities. And you're grading, and then you're saying, we'll also take off for what we need to do for the stormwater improvements we had to change. So you're not really incurring that cost of this burden that you just communicated to us. So we need to work that out on this end on the fee in lieu. I'm really concerned about it. I've got other concerns, and I'll get to them. I'll go through them very briefly because they're related to the developer agreement. The fee in lieu is one. The other is the vested rights language on section 4.4. In the event the town adopts new, different, or amended development regulations the developer views as more favorable to the development than the regulations in effect at the time of the adoption of the agreement, developer may elect to be bound by the new regulations or ordinance, and it's called an after-adopted regulation, without any further agreement from the town. In the event the developer elects that to be bound by the after-adopted regulation, the developer will communicate the fact to the planning director in writing and notes such change on the future permit applications affected by the change. It's confusing because I Googled it, and the only other time this phrase comes up is another developer agreement done by Parker Poe and Wendell. So my concern is, would it usurp conditions that are agreed to in the zoning conditions? Because we've agreed to it in this that says, well, yeah, we agreed to those zoning conditions, but we have this document that now says we want to do something different. That's a concern. 4.5 residential uses, development uses, it says residential building types will include townhomes and apartments. I don't understand why that's in the developer agreement when that's part of the rezoning. The transportation improvements reference a fee in lieu. I don't see a calculation. I don't know what that reference is. It says here, traffic impact analysis updates will be approved administratively and shall not require approval of the planning commission or town council. Transportation improvements outlined in this section shall be automatically adjusted. This is one example of automatic adjustments to this agreement that could have unintended consequences to the whole project and the benefit of the town. I have some curious questions about the impacts on the Jurgen property on that entry road. Also concerns on the town is dedicating a lot of land of right-of-way and easements. Dedicating when the town uses it, it means we're gifting it. You can have it for that. The language when you're gifting or dedicating to the town requires other fees and credits. So concerns about that. And convey is another. And then the 4.10, the Parks and Recreation fee, we need to adjust. The references to sections of the UDO aren't sections of the UDO. This complicated, we have a calculation in our UDO for calculating what property's worth, what the fee in lieu should be. This is like the appraisal and minus some other stuff. We need to look at that. Subsequent approvals required. 4.12, project may require subsequent quasi-judicial and/or administrative approvals or modifications, including but not limited to special use permits, variances, design alternatives and administrative modifications, referenced later as these minor modifications, they'll automatically amend the agreement again there too. My question there for the attorney, not tonight, she'll probably have to research it, is what is the law? I have a lot of problems with having with all the trouble we had with our development agreement, one of the benefits was that when it wanted to be changed, it had to come before council. If you have the ability to change all these things administratively, how invested are you in getting this document right the first time? You have a lot of, and there are changes we may never see with consequences we'll only see later. And then the 413 amendments and modifications and extension. Again, it's the minor modification language needs to be removed. If there's going to be a modification to the developer agreement, it should come back to council and the town manager and town attorney. Almost done. This right to cure clause, I'm not sure why that's in there. It's redundant. It references breach and cure, the statute in 160D 1008, but we have a section on 416 mediation clause, 418 default clause, and a 4.22 legal actions clause. I'm not sure why we need a right to cure clause in there as well. And then the reimbursement agreement section is very odd to me because it seems to reference some statutory options, but it also seems to be limiting when we could create maybe a different reimbursement structure that works best for the town, maybe to get more money up front, particularly when it comes to fee. That's the other thing with the fee in lieu on the parks. That's money that comes earlier in the process versus something that might come later. I have more, but that's sort of the foundation of my concerns with the development agreement. And again, with so many of these elements, and there's Greenway references in here too, tied to the rezoning that want to get sent to the Planning Commission. I don't think we can send it to Planning Commission before we work this out because there's still overlap in the two documents, and to know what's going where, I think is really important for Planning Commission clarity, but also for council clarity. So those are my comments.
Okay, Mr. Morris, do you care to respond to any of those?
Briefly, I'll just say that development agreements are very specialized, technical, with a number of statutes that require a lot of legal expertise, of which I have very little of and rely on others. You have a very capable town attorney, and so there are a lot of good reasons for the things that you just raised. And so what I'd say is that we'll get together with your town attorney and we'll work through all of that. But I think that we can give you the confidence through that process that the development agreement as written or with certain modifications will be just fine.
Okay, thank you, sir. Council, since I gave Mr. Dellinger an opportunity, anybody else before we recognize someone else? Anybody on council? Okay.
It raises some legitimate concerns.
Well, I'm not saying they're not legitimate. Not sure we need to mention them all here this evening. It's obvious that we need to, that our attorney will work with us and through that process and with you guys as well. So thank you for, I know it's been a long process. We hope we're in the short rows, as I call them, but time will tell. But we'll keep the process moving from my perspective. Thank you, sir. Okay, I don't know that there's anybody else from the applicant we'll hear from. I know there's Mr. Gupton in the audience who indicated that he desired to speak. Was the one person, so I'll recognize him at this time. Good evening, sir.
Evening, council, staff, and guests. Always a pleasure to be here. My name is Buddy Gupton. I live at 153 Luxor Wind Court in Garner. And full disclosure, I'm the mayor-elect. 2 weeks from now, Ken and I will do a little ceremony and we'll change seats. And he'll get the pleasure of sitting out here. And I'll get the pressure of sitting up there. I had a lot of notes here, but I guess my main comment is that I just want to emphasize what an extremely important decision this is. In 200 years of history in Garner, there are about 3 life-changing decisions, 3 once-in-a-lifetime occasions that have defined Garner. One is when the railroad came through in the 1850s. That was Garner. They put that depot there. That's Garner. Still there. We moved it across the tracks, but that was a life-changing event, a once-in-a-lifetime. The second one was when Highway 70 bypassed downtown and split our city in half. Okay, that's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of deal. And what's before us now, the fate of this 96 acres, this golden gem of a property with natural resources and encapsulated, protected by 2 beautiful parks, and across the railroad track from downtown, what we do now will be felt for 50, 75 years. This is of the same magnitude. What we do with that 96 acres, we'll never have a chance to do it again. And it's going to be just as impactful as the railroad was. It's going to be just as impactful as Highway 70 splitting our town in half. That's how important this is. I don't envy your position of how to figure this out. We've gone from the 30,000 foot level to looking at the very important details. The fiscal impact, is there water and sewer? Are there enough turn lanes? What's the fee in lieu of? These are extremely important. I guess at the end of the day, I have a lot of confidence in our planning commission and in our planning staff. And I think what you're getting ready to do is decide whether to send this to them for more review or just say yes or just say no. But it's just an extremely important decision. Thank you for the consideration you're giving it. And just remember, man, we got to aim high. We got to shoot for the best. If we do this thing, it's got to be the best thing we've ever done, or don't do anything. Good luck. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. We appreciate that. Okay, was there, I didn't see anybody else who said they, okay, who did I miss?
Front row there, Mayor.
There.
Oh. Just state your name and address, if you will, and then you can speak.
Well, my name is Selena McGee, and I actually live in one of the adjoining properties.
Okay. The address?
413 East Garner Road.
Okay, thank you.
When I originally bought my property, Garner's plan was for all of that to be park. And I have a little boy, and I thought, this is going to be perfect. Let me get this property. He's going to play ball. He's going to grow up in Garner like I did. And it's going to be great. And I understand things change, and I understand there's a need for growth, and I do know people are coming, and we can't stop that. But I live right there, and I can tell you that I don't get my kid, and I don't walk downtown. We get in our car and we drive and we park just because it's not safe to ride a bike or walk or go with our dog. And I don't really, I mean, and I'm sure I'm probably wrong, but I don't really think someone at the very back of this neighborhood where these townhomes are proposed are going to walk all the way up to Main Street. I like to think that Garner, Main Street, downtown is going to grow and have charm and character and that kind of thing, but I think putting commercial across the street from it is either going to bring the people in the neighborhood to that spot and not across to downtown, or they're still going to go somewhere else. I sit in my driveway most mornings for close to 10 minutes to be able to leave. And I have 2 jobs. I work for an attorney in downtown Raleigh, so sometimes I'm turning right, but I also work on horse farms that are scattered all over the state. And a lot of times I turn left because I have to go Jones Sausage Road to get on 40. The improvements that have been mentioned for New Rand Road are improvements that are needed now without a huge neighborhood being put in there. So these improvements to this intersection, they do those. That fixes the traffic that's there now, but we're talking about bringing kind of for that area astronomical amounts of traffic every day. And I just don't see where one light and a couple turn lanes are going to be able to fix that. I also think about it needing to be more apartments and less townhomes, but I also think that that creates an extremely transient trend. And for someone who's from Garner, part of the reason that we love it here is because it's not. it's a hometown. So I do think there needs to be some look at it, but I also don't think that 25 plus 100 people stuck back there is a good idea for EMS, for roads, for schools, for anything really. I just think that all of these multifamily housing units are probably necessary because of the growth, but I don't really think it's the reason that people loved Garner to begin with. And when you keep adding multifamily housing, you do away with the single-family housing. And so I know that I listen to people talk about numbers for traffic and houses being 2.5 people, but I don't think that they really take into account that you still have families moving here, and if you're not moving into a single-family house, you're moving into a townhome. And with a 3-story townhome, that's probably where they're going to go, and it's not really going to be 2.5 people. So those were just some of my thoughts, plus the fact that there's a lot of people that walk behind my house every day because they love the open space, they love the trails. I know there's a huge section that you guys set aside for trails, but the trails come all the way up to right behind my house. I can literally see them from my house, people walking with their dogs and with their families. And I feel like that's going to be a big loss too. So those were sort of just the things that I wanted to touch on, being someone who lives right there and sees things daily.
Okay, thank you for taking your time to come out and express your concerns. As you can tell, maybe you've been to our meetings before, but these types of issues are not easy for any of us, council. And I have confidence that this council desires to do what is good for all the citizens of Garner. Sometimes one neighborhood maybe is competing against another in terms of what's going to go where. And always people who live close to new development have sort of a personal stake in these things. So at any rate, thank you. This is part of what our democracy is about, giving people an opportunity to come out and speak to their government, and this government tries to listen, and ultimately will try to make a decision that is in the best interest of the town and for its people. As Mr. Gupton noted, there will be a new person sitting in this chair, so I probably won't be here when the final decision is made, but as mayor of this council, I will speak to the integrity of these people that are before you. Thank you. Council, it's my understanding that we would vote at least on the matter of the rezoning, sending the rezoning issue to the Planning Commission. That by statute, I believe, is essentially a requirement anyway. Is that right, Ms. Jones?
That's correct.
Okay. So it's a formality to do that, but I'm going to ask you to do a motion. The latter portion of that is sort of tagged on to it, but if I understand, we technically don't need to vote. We had a public hearing on the developmental agreement, but there's no particular reason we have to vote on that tonight. Is that right, Ms. Jones?
No, you wouldn't enter into the development agreement unless you approve the rezoning application.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, point of order. There's a process in our UDO for Parks and Rec to make a recommendation on dedication and fee in lieu, and for the Planning Commission to also make a recommendation on dedication and fee in lieu. How can we send something right now to the Planning Commission that is not in the form or comprised of that recommendation coming from those two bodies? We're sending them something that hasn't gone through our process.
I'm not sure I agree with that, but Mr. Marsh, you want to speak to that? And I'll ask Ms. Jones also.
Yeah, and Ms. Jones, I think, is well versed in this issue. The Parks and Rec dedication issue did come up kind of late in the process. Is something we need to make sure is followed. I mean, I think practically speaking, if the recommendation came from Parks and Rec that we want you to dedicate land, you don't have this project, right? That we'd have to go away or redo the whole thing. So I don't think that's a likely outcome, but
That's not necessary, I don't interrupt you, that's not necessarily true, because they don't have to go for the maximum dedication. They can scale it back and make a balance on the fee in lieu and say, dedicate those ball fields and do this other thing. So again, I think the concern I have is a process we're not familiar with, but is part of our UDO. And we need to figure out how to navigate it because it's in our UDO. And the concern I have around the developer agreement is it tries to short circuit that process by saying, well, we don't want to get that recommendation, or we want to limit the scope of that recommendation through this private agreement that we're having with the developer. So I'm not comfortable referring it, we could leave the public hearing open until, one, we can go through this long list of concerns and issues on the development agreement that are relevant to the process of land dedication and fee in lieu. So we've got some carts and horses here we've got to figure out, but it doesn't make sense for Planning Commission to get it before we've resolved those issues, because they're looking at something that may or may not be even relevant to what we decide in the developer agreement and how to proceed on the Parks and Rec and Planning Commission recommendations on dedication.
Just to be blunt, this case needs to move forward. We came here in July and undertook a significant change to the project at the request of council. Our version of the development agreement was ready months ago, and we waited on feedback that stalled the process. We appreciate that time needs to be taken, but this case needs to move forward. It's time, and we appreciate that there may be some things that need to be considered. Happy to go through the Parks and Recreation approval process. Ultimately, when that process culminates, council has the decision as to whether it accepts that recommendation or not. And so in doing so, if council's decision is that this project is appropriate as proposed, that any decision from the Parks and Rec Advisory Board can be overridden. So we're happy to follow the necessary processes, but not a delay to the project that's already been, sidetracked to address any number of issues.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'm going to give other council members an opportunity to weigh in on this topic if they choose to at this time before we move further. So, Council, you've heard your fellow council member, Mr. Dellinger, express his concerns on the matter. Certainly in the past, we have routinely referred matters to the Planning Commission without going through the process I believe he's talking about. Perhaps I need to look closely at what he's speaking of, but I have a lot of confidence in our town attorney that she will keep us apprised of those steps that need to take place to keep this on track. Any council members care to make a comment on the matter? Anybody?
Well, I know by whether we say yay or nay, it can be forwarded. The proposal can go to the Planning Commission. Regards to the developer agreement, Mr. Dellinger has brought up some concerns, and looking at this calendar, Planning Commission would be December 11th, and the Parks and Rec on the 18th, and then the council has a meeting on the 19th. I would just a suggestion, trying to keep it moving, ask that Mr. Dellinger get his comments over to Attorney Jones, and they talk with Mr. Shank and Mr. Marsh, and update or incorporate some of the changes, language, whatever, and that gets back to the council email so we can review it sometime in the next couple of weeks. I know we got Thanksgiving to get a whole week. We meet back on the 5th. If it could get to the council that week so we can incorporate any changes, and then those changes can move forward to the Planning Commission and Parks and Rec. So at least try to keep it moving in a way that it's, because if we get it and see things that we are concerned about, then we'll, it might be delayed to the Planning Commission. But I'm trying to keep Mr. Dellinger's concerns moving along with the project, trying to move along, and that's at least try to incorporates or investigate and talk, let them discuss some of these issues and concerns he has, and then get that document to us the first week in December with the changes noted, so we can see the changes.
Okay, any other council member want to weigh in on this?
Yes, sir, if I could. I would agree with Mr. Singleton. Let's keep this thing moving and send it on down there and let our attorney meet up with Mr. Dillinger and representatives to address these issues, because ultimately, we're the final authority on it anyway. If it's not done, we're not going to approve it, but give them opportunity to work those details out. But go ahead and send it on down to the Planning Commission and let them do what they do best, and that's what they're there for. They'll see where it comes back out. So I would agree with what he said, to keep the project moving, send it on to the Planning Commission, and let the legalities get together and work it out. Would that work, Ms. Jones?
I'll certainly do whatever you direct me to do. I just want to remind you that under the version of the UDO that it's applicable to this particular project, that this decision about dedication and fee in lieu would normally happen at the subdivision stage, which would be later in the process. So the fact that this hasn't been, resolved yet is sort of a function of how that version of the UDO was structured at the time. But I do believe that, Planning Commission can review this, and Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee can look at this, before it would return to you for a decision.
Okay,
I think what's happened is we've learned a couple of lessons from the developer agreement with the White Oak and Bryan Road project, where we didn't have numbers and they were using cost estimates that were 2 years old. And I think that's what we just kind of want to, I understand Mr. Dillon's concern because he's correct. We need to have updated formula calculations, however you want to say it, because based off that agreement, we finally got that one worked out. And I understand, I appreciate where we're trying to get here. We're trying to get accurate numbers, as accurate as we can today. We know in the future those numbers may not be worth anything, but at least there's something based, it's more recent than 2 years ago, as the other agreement had.
Mr. Vance.
I'd like to add that based upon what was said by the mayor-elect in reference to having the confidence in the planning staff and also the planning commission, I'd like to also mention we have a high level of expertise on the planning commission as well when it comes to reviewing the plans, we're looking for consistency. So I'm on the side of let's go ahead and move forward with providing the planning commission, getting the planning commission review for consistency, while simultaneously working through the problems that we have with the concerns we have with the development agreement. Those two things can work together going through the process, and I just want to add that.
Anything else?
I think we need to move it forward as well, and that we can do these, investigate these issues simultaneously and keep it on track.
Okay, thank you all and you've heard from Ms. Jones. I agree. I think, to keep this thing moving is in everybody's interest. And so the best way to do that, I believe, you can form a motion as you choose, but I think Mayor Pro Tem Vance's proposal to go ahead and formally suggest it should go on to the Planning Commission with the caveat that this can be done in simultaneously with bringing the issues to Ms. Jones for further consideration. Are you okay with that, Ms. Jones? Okay. Otherwise, I'm not sure exactly what the alternative is other than delay.
Mr. Vance putting that in a motion.
Was that stated as a motion, or are you asking me to state it as a motion?
No. I don't think I can make the motion,
Okay.
but yeah.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I move that the CZPD 2204, the park at Garner Station, conditional rezoning, be moved, be referred to the Planning Commission for consistency and review, and while the development agreement go through the process of clarification and discussion and clarification discussion at the same time with the attorney and the various parties involved.
Second.
Okay. Motion.
Offer a friendly amendment to make sure that all of council's comments are referred to the planning commission for their consideration, documented and summarized in text form for them.
Is that customarily done anyway? I mean, is that, I mean, well,
Recently, commission meeting, and that was not the case, so I'll make it part of this motion.
okay, we have an amendment to the motion. You heard that?
One other friendly amendment, that the council will get updates on the development agreement when changes are made, and those changes will be noticed so we can recognize the differences in in a revised developer agreement.
Okay, I believe we have two amendments added to the motion. I guess we can vote individually on the amendments. Is that correct, Ms. Jones? So on the first amendment that was mentioned by Mr. Dellinger, council has to approve if you want to approve that amendment. So I'll ask you to vote at this time. If you favor the amendment to the original motion, you can vote aye.
Aye.
If you oppose, vote no. Okay, that amendment is approved. And then Mr. Singleton made a further amendment to the motion. I don't know if we need to restate that or not. Or are you prepared to vote on that?
You meant the revision process for the developer agreement. Is that what you meant?
I believe he was asking for updates on that process.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So if you favor that amendment also to the motion, would you vote aye?
Aye.
Any opposition? No. So the two amendment passes, and I believe we now go back to the main motion at this time with the amendments added, and ask you if you favor the motion. If you do, vote aye.
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 Any opposition? No.
No.
Okay. It's noted that the motion passes with one negative vote with the two amendments that were approved also. Anything else I need to cover on that? Okay. Thank you all for your time. Hopefully this is keeping us in a mode of moving in a good direction, and we'll look forward to hearing from you further. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, aren't you going to miss this?
Not at all.
It's part. You've heard people say that watching democracy work is like, what is it, to seeing people grind sausage or something to that effect.
Make sausage, yes.
Yeah, and sometimes it's messy and not so good, but we're all trying to be fair and reasonable in the process, and
It's all good.
I think so. Thank you, gentlemen, for your patience, and ladies also. Okay, we're not quite yet finished for the evening, so we've got a little more work to do. At this point in time, we will have, if there are any committee reports, I'm not aware of any.
Yes, sir, there is one. I apologize for
Okay,
not telling
go
you
right
earlier.
ahead. Yeah.
It's in reference to the human resources, and we have one individual I'd like to put up for approval, and that is Mr. Joe Gupton as alternate on the Board of Adjustments.
Okay, and that comes with a full recommendation from your committee. Not sure it requires a second, but what say you, council?
I'll second.
Okay, all right. So the motion is to approve Mr. Joe Gupton for that position. If you favor that, would you vote aye?
Aye.
Any opposition? No. Well, there is none. Okay, thank you for that committee report. I'm not aware of any others. I will ask now the town manager if he will make his report to council.
I'm going to call on Assistant Town Manager Ms. Miller to cover the talk of the town.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Before you is your November report for Talk of the Town. Just want to highlight a few of the items included in this month's report. We are in the process of kicking off our FY25 budget process internally with our staff, and we'll be doing that coming back from the Thanksgiving holiday. So this will set the stage for the work and discussions that we will have with council at the February retreat. Wanted to make council aware that we have been told by the Wake County Tax Administrator that information on reval will not be available to us till January, probably about mid-January. So we are working towards inviting him to come to your February retreat to talk about that as part of our overall discussions for the FY25 budget. Just wanted to make council aware of that, and we're getting ready to start that budget process. Excited to share with you the work the planning department has been up to. They have launched the development pipeline information page on the town's website. This was a request that came from council a few months ago. On the website is a development pipeline report that'll be updated monthly that residents can take a look at to really get a better understanding of all the development in the town that's really in that pipeline. Looking at our parks, recreation, and cultural resources, I'm excited to share with you that the new resurfacing of the playground area at Garner Recreational Park has been completed. So we removed the wood mulch that was there with the playground area and replaced it with poured-in-place rubber surfacing. We attached a picture to it. It's a nice bright blue that kind of adds a pop of color to the playground area, and we're excited to have that project completed. We've had a couple of conversations with council in the last few months regarding traffic calming in town, and just wanted to follow up, letting council know that the engineering department has started that process of reviewing the town's traffic calming policy. In addition to that, created an internal tracking process for submitted applications and inquiries. We have a traffic study at Greenbrier neighborhood that's been completed, and the report and recommendations are being finalized. Also, in the coming weeks, another traffic study will begin at Arbor Green neighborhood as well. So a lot going on regarding traffic calming. Our last meeting, it was brought up that there were some concerns regarding the intersection of Hebron Church and White Oak intersection. We've taken a look at that and refer that to NCDOT. There does appear to be some ruts in the road there, so we've asked them to take a look at that and resolve that. And then the last item, there's a few property maintenance issues that have been brought to our attention. They have either been resolved or in process. The final element with your report for November is the monthly analytics from the Garner Info app. For the last 30 days, we had 29 requests included. Of the requests, which you see on the left-hand side of your report, 86% or so have been completed or in progress. And interesting enough, for this month, it was Public Works and our police department that was responding to a lot of the requests. And if you look at the type of request, that makes sense based on what we're seeing for the last 30 days. So that's a brief overview of your November report. We're happy to answer any questions that the council may have this evening.
Thanks so much, Ms. Miller.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, well, I was going to let council ask questions, but I wanted to acknowledge the time taken to provide all the information. So, Phil, I'll start with you. Any questions?
Great report. Thank you very much. Traffic calming. I know in the historic downtown, we've got one at one end of the business area and the other's down quite a distance the other way. I was going over there to a coffee shop the other day and almost got ran over by a car flying through the old town. I think we really need one more of those right in the center of Old Town, because once they cross up one end, they're flying right back down through there again, right where all the cars are parked. And
we have plans for some other, excuse me, Mayor. I think the town engineer's coming up to tell us what the plans are.
What's the plan?
There's other.
So we had actually thought about doing another speed table downtown. We did not, because we are still working on making that Rand Mill and Main Street intersection a three-way stop. And if that's going to be a stop sign, we don't want a speed table too close to that stop. We can always reevaluate for another location if needed once we get the stop sign in. And just as an update on that, since we are here, Public Works and Engineering took a look at it. We're just looking at how to kind of safely block off the parking spaces that would be in the area of the intersection. I had a conversation with Shayla today, and she's going to be talking with the downtown group as well about potentially using that space, the vacant space that is created, in a creative way, maybe for a public art purpose or something meaningful, because we will have to take some of the spaces out to be able to make sure that people aren't backing out into the intersection. So we're working on the logistics of that, and then we can get those signs installed.
Thank you. You've answered my question.
Perfect.
That's all I have.
Okay, all right, thank you. Again, thank you. So, anything else, Mr. Manager?
I'm going to mention a handful of events that are coming up in the near future. First is the Downtown Garner Pop-Up Market. That'll be on November 25th, which is Saturday, from 10 to 2 on Main Street. Then we have a number of holiday announcements. The holiday block party will be Saturday, December the 2nd, from 2 to 4 at the Garner Recreation Center. The Garner Optimist Christmas Parade will follow the holiday block party starting at approximately 4:30 p.m. And then there will be a tree lighting following that, immediately after that, around 6 to 6:30. And that will conclude the festivities for that day. You can find more information on the Garner's website, www.garnernc.gov. We'll also have a free holiday movie matinee on December the 3rd and December the 10th at the GPAC. Both of those will be at 2 o'clock, and the movie will be announced as we get closer to the event. We got a Jolly Broadway holiday concert with David Burnham. He'll be there on December 9th from 7:30, or at 7:30. And he has been on, I guess, Broadway in New York, and maybe has been here before several times when we had our Broadway series. So a big talent there coming to Garner. The Noose River Big Band Swing-In Holiday Concert will be on December 14th at 7:30 at the GPAC. So things are going to be really busy at the GPAC for the next month or so.
And let me just mention, and I think probably most people know this, and Mr. Dellinger can confirm this, but the parade route that I guess was established last year and was used, I think, by the fire department this year, which encompasses essentially Main Street. It doesn't start on East Garner Road and come across the railroad track. So that's where this will be again this year. Maybe
Yes,
maybe
I don't know
everybody
if
knows.
Councilmember Dellinger wants to speak more about the parade.
Parade is going to be amazing.
A real parade,
So,
right?
Great parade. But staging roads will be New Rand and Carroll, and it'll go east to west down Main Street. The firemen went the other direction for their parade because they did staging across the road, but so ignore that. We'll be going down towards the fire station, and then hopefully people walk back up for tree lighting and that kind of stuff. So it starts at 4:30 on the 2nd.
Right, one other thing to mention is the town and the Triangle Land Conservancy closed on what we're calling the Lyles Conservation Property. Think about 96 acres along Swift Creek, directly across from Lake Benson at Highway 50. So the towns will be stewards of that property, and we plan to have a celebration on November the 30th at the Rand Bryan House property from 1 to 3 o'clock. So that was a long process. We got state funds from the North Carolina Land and Water Fund, over $700,000 that contributed to that. And if you remember, the town's match was the purchase of the property on the west side of the Highway 50, including the Rand Bryan House property and some pasture property that adjoined some TLC property. So just a great partnership, and we hope to recognize that next week.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the manager? Okay, I'll just start with Phil on my left. He sits beside the manager, and we'll come this way. Go right ahead.
Council reports.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I have one request, Mr. Mayor. It's been a long time. We used to get a lot of updates from our economics development person, and we've not had anything in a long, long time. And Either it was in closed session or in open, we had presentation. But I would like to request a current status of things going on that he is working on, and it could be a work session, however how you want to do it, but good solid information that we know what's going on, because I can get asked a lot of questions, and I need to get it from the horse's mouth and what we got happening and what's not going to happen. So if staff could facilitate that in some way, fashion, or form.
It's planned already for next week.
Oh, it is?
The at the work session.
Work session.
Yeah.
Probably not in here.
November work session. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not listed in here. It was listed in the previous agenda update. But yeah, it's planned for the work session next week.
A good detail one. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr.
Okay,
Mayor.
thank you. Mr. Singleton.
On the Talk of the Town, the second item was the development pipeline information, which is very handy. I spent quite a bit of time on it last night. And we talked a lot about North Garner tonight and Garner Road and Creech Road. We approved the Trine Point Apartments some time back. That was the affordable housing complex, 300 plus apartments. There are 4 others in the pipeline that y'all might not know about. 734 more units. So if you add those to the 300 that have been approved, that's 1,034 units. Wow, what a coincidence. We just talked about 1,050 units tonight. So you're looking at increasing traffic from this proposed project of 15%. I would guess that those projects would increase another 15% or more. So you're looking at increasing the traffic on Creech Road by at least a third. I'm just letting y'all know it's on both sides. There's 734 units coming, along with the 300 plus we've approved, and that are proposed. I'll rephrase that. They're not coming, they're proposed. So it's something that needs to be considered, because we've already got a intersection at Creech Road and Garner Road that's an issue. And, you know, I talked about kids earlier. Well, guess what? This doubles the number of kids if you do the 2.5 off the census. So from having 600 kids who need to go to school, and this is including, this is from kindergarten through senior high, you've doubled the number. So I'm just saying that this development tool is real handy. I spent quite a bit of time on it. Had to learn how to operate the thing, but it's very handy. But I'm just telling you that these other projects are coming forward, and you're talking about 5 projects, including the one that's been approved, and the numbers will be almost identical to the number that's being proposed at Garner Park Station. It's just something to think about, and the dramatic impact it's going to have over there. I'll stop there. But go online, please go on there and use it. It's very helpful.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Barringer.
I don't have anything, sir.
Okay, Mr. Dellinger.
To Mr. Singleton's point, I think with our development review process and the presentations that come to council, getting this holistic aggregate view down on things coming down the pipeline is something we have to have, because we don't like it, but we might have to pick and choose one development over another because there just isn't enough resource there infrastructure wise to handle it. And if we accept, big one's going to planning commission now, what's in the pipeline? I don't know. I haven't seen it. I haven't heard. Are they better than this one? Do they have better conditions? Are they better product? We don't know. So we've got to get more information in front of us to make strategic decisions. We adopted the Garner Forward Plan tonight. It has a lot of criteria we should use as a framework, not a requirement, but a framework for having those conversations, because they, want to rush this thing through. I know they've been in the pipeline a long time, but what was this? One of my teachers always used to say, your emergency is not my urgency, or your vice versa. I can't help you. I'm not going to sit up here, and I hope we don't want to sit up here in 3 years and say, man, we did rush through that project, and now we're stuck with this project. But aside from that, there was a brush fire down on New Bethel Church Road this weekend, was reported by a resident, and I reached out to Chief Poole to get an incident report, which I'd never seen an incident report before. But I'd like the town manager to get some more information on this particular one. It occurred on the 18th. It says New Bethel Church Road and Acorn Grove Road, and it's really a lot of interesting information. But it said they arrived on the scene and that there's an old controlled burn that appeared to reignite and spread around the areas. And they had a permit and all this, but kind of want to know who's responsible for that. If we can find out who's responsible and kind of just if, were they in line with what they were permitted to be doing? A report says there's 3 acres that burned, and the conditions had been very dry. There wasn't a burn ban here, but there was guidance from the state on second thoughts on your controlled burns. But if you get some more information on who was responsible for that, and that we don't have
a date. What was the date?
The 18th.
18th. Okay.
Like I said, and Chief Poole he forwarded me the incident report. I know we've had issues with other burn issues down there, and I just want to make sure we don't have repeat offenders or, but I just want to get our facts on what's going on down there. But it could have been pretty dangerous with as windy and as dry as it's been. What they're supposed to. That's all I got.
Okay, Mr. Vance.
Just one statement I'd like to make in reference to the affordable workforce housing piece that came up tonight. I know that back in October, our second session referenced workforce housing. We mentioned the establishment of a task force to look at strategically the whole town of Garner as to the appropriate type of fit for affordable housing. And just like to bring that back to the forefront to establishment of that task force, so we can start looking at strategically how things are being brought before us by the developers and how we can incorporate our plan into what they're bringing before us. Okay. So that's what I would like to bring back to the forefront: establishment of the task force to look at affordable workforce housing.
And I would just comment as an outgoing person that, I think that's a good idea. And I would like to think that probably, if not before, that certainly could be a topic for the upcoming retreat, which at this time is trying to be scheduled for January or February.
That'll be February.
Okay, all right.
Retreat, yeah.
Well, but at any rate, that would be my suggestion, is that if it, or maybe the administration has some ideas of how to formulate that and what you would recommend back to council on a
Probably want
task
to
force.
take a little time to look at some examples in the
Okay.
area and then think about the makeup and the charge
Yeah.
of the group, and try to get something back sooner than February, but depends on what we find out.
Anything else, Mr. Vance? Okay. And I know we have a closed session, so I'll be very brief. I'd just like to say to our town, it's never easy losing a person to death. Fortunately, during the time I've been here, there have been few. But for those who could show up and be a part of the service, it was nice for you to support in that way. I know not everybody could. So the town, I think, sent flowers and tried to do those proper things that we do. I don't know, I'm not suggesting anything else. If you individually want to do something to recognize David, that'll be your prerogative. But several of you were there, and I thought that was a service certainly most appropriate for Mr. Bamford, and was glad to be there. That's all I have. So I think we, at this point, need to move into closed session, so I'll entertain a motion to that effect with the site that is in the agenda.
I move pursuant to NC General Statute, Section 143318, 11, subset A, subset 3, to consult with the town attorney regarding litigation.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded that we go into closed session. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposition, there is none. The mayor will declare that we're going to go into closed session to consult with the town attorney. The mayor declares that the council is back in regular session, having gone into closed session to consult with the town attorney regarding litigation, and after hearing a report, no formal action was taken, but the attorney provided information regarding ongoing processes that she's working on. Having done that, there's no other items on the agenda that we haven't concluded this evening, so I will entertain a motion that we adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, it's approved. All get home safely and have a happy Thanksgiving, as Phil said.